Okay, let's call to order the May 1st, 2024 Falls Church Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Trainer, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Friedlander?
Here.
Mr. Puentes? Ms. Comont?
Here.
Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Mr. Hyra?
Here.
Absent is Mr. Krasner, but we have a quorum.
Okay. And we have a straightforward agenda. We have one main action item on the Oak Park townhomes. We have a work session on the floodplain map, and then a work session on the council priorities work plan. We're going to recommend that we move item 7B on the council priorities work plan to after the information items so that we can take that down here, sitting at the table in a more conversational style, and just kind of plow through the rest of the agenda items. So with that change, do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move to adopt the meeting agenda as adjusted.
Second. Moved
Second.
and seconded by, by Tim. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Receipt of petitions, Mr. Trainer, do we have any written correspondence?
Yes, Chair. The commission received 2 pieces of written correspondence from community members, both on floodplain ordinance text amendments. Those were from Ellen Heather and Layla and Joe Nelson.
Thank you very much. And the written correspondence will be addressed in the work session item we have later today. Even though we thought we were going to take action on the floodplain map today, we're going to move that. That has been moved and advertised for our next meeting. So, and do we have any in-person petitions? Anybody here speaking on items not on the agenda?
I have not received any petitions to speak in person, Mr. Chair. If there's anyone in the audience tonight that wishes to speak, please identify yourself, but it doesn't look like it.
Okay. Item 6, action items, Oak Park Townhomes, site plan public hearing. Mr. Stoddard.
Thank you, Chair, members of the commission. I'm happy to introduce this item. So this is, the title here is Site Plan Application, Munis number 2024-0089, as well as Munis application 2020, well, they're both under the same number, 2024 and 0089. There are 2 actions for you tonight. One is on a site plan, and the other is on a subdivision that's, of course, related to the same application. You've seen this at most recently as a work session item. This is the city's first townhome proposal under the revised T-zone ordinance. Staff is recommending approval of the application at following your public hearing tonight. You can see the staff recommended motions in your staff report. And as part of the approval, we are suggesting 3 things that can be resolved, we think administratively after the Planning Commission's final approval. One is related to any remaining minor technical comments. Second is a revision to the sidewalk design. And then third is further refinement of the architectural facades. We think staff thinks these are all relatively minor in nature, and that's why we're recommending addressing them post-approval. But with that, by way of introduction, I'll turn it over to our case planner on this one, Henry Zhang.
Thanks, Mr. Stoddard. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Henry Zhang, the lead reviewer for this site plan / subdivision application. The Planning Commission is requested to hold a public hearing and take the final action on this 2 related application, which was in front of the Planning Commission on March 20 in a working session. And since then, we have received numerous updates since that work session, which include the following. April 3rd, we received the second submission, which include the response to the staff's comments on the submission 1.0, as well as a revised site plan. April 24th, we received additional architecture renderings, also included in the attachment. Also, a sidewalk redesign in front of, for the frontage along Park Avenue. April 17, DRC staff provide the comments on the second submission, which are all minor technical in nature, included also in the attachment. We also receive urban forest comments on April 25th. Those are the comments related to the canopy, tree canopy, native species and native cultivars, and then landscaping management and landscaping lighting. As you can see in the submittal, those issues has been all addressed in the second submission. All the lighting fixtures are full cutoff luminaires, and we have also, I think the applicant also submitted a lighting study, which I will talk in detail later on. We also receive a citizen opposition, one opposition, on April 29th, basically focused on several issues as attached as 3.C, basically complaints about parking, complaints, doubt about the stormwater management, and also the width of the alley. I think the third, excuse me, I can't remember all of them. The last one is about possible lighting spilled over from this structure. On the staff side, we analyze all the updates up to the preparation of the staff report publication date. Specifically, you will see on the staff report, starting from line 50, we include a comments response table, which basically provide a response to all the comments and questions received during the work session. It's a very long table from page number 3 to all the way to page 7. But I will focusing on 5 specific issues here, major one. The first one is a photometric study. This is page number 4. It's part of the response to the concern about the safety of the southern row of the townhouses, specifically the Muse areas. You will see from the response, the applicant has provided additional measures, include the physical barrier, which consists of a short, solid wall and fences. I think the highest part is about 7 feet. I think they're going to provide the detailed dimension. That means this physical barrier is between the southern row of townhouses and the existing parking structure. So basically what they did is to raise the finishing grade from the Oak Street all the way to the back of the lot 12. So in that way, we have a really physical barrier separate to development. And then in addition to that, I think they also provide that photometric study. We believe, staff believe, the only thing is that the rating, the foot candle rating is not high enough, which you will see here on page 2. The rating basically range from 0.4 to 1.1, and staff recommend they are going to increase this reading to 1.25. That's the minimum foot candle for the general visibility for any walking path. And I think that's basically the first issues. The second one is additional treatment on both the site and building design level to greatly increase the individuality of the units, specifically the units facing Park Avenue. However, if you can see through this architecture rendering, staff also believe additional refinement may be necessary. That's why we have a condition number 2, basically, condition number 3, sorry, to further address that concern. If you turn to page 5 under the architecture, you will see the discussion on the specific improvement they already put in place. But however, we believe additional refinement need to be done prior to final approval. Number 3, the applicant proposed a new sidewalk design along the Park Avenue. Basically, they follow the city's streetscape design standards, which basically, in a way, to respond to the comments in order to provide more public space so that they can accommodate additional amenity if it's possible. That discussion has been provided. Well, actually, this one we don't have because previously it's the sidewalk who jog around the corner, which in order to connect it to the adjacent property. And then in this solution, they basically get rid of that situation, so the transition is smooth. Basically, we asked them to, the applicants show in this revised design, so they basically pave all the sidewalk to the back of the curb. That way will also increase the pervious areas by 200 square feet. So we believe it's a win-win situation because a lot of traffic, pedestrian traffic will be in place when this project is done. Number 4, additional cross-section received at the time of the 2.0 submission. You will see also the rendering submitted on April 24th. We believe by using the combination of wall, raise the finished grade of the path, and also the fence, we believe there is a physical barrier in place on top of the enough lighting that will be a safe environment we try to achieve. Number 5 is also a response directly to one of the concern because during the work session, question has been raised about how the car getting out of the lot 6 and lot 12. The applicant proposed a vehicle movement analysis, which using a mid-sized vehicle. It's proved that those garages on lot 6 and 12 will be easily accessible. So people may question about the mid-sized car, but this is the urban environment. I think when people buy in, they may have to change their behavior because this is not designed for suburban garage. So this is basically the number 5th major issue. Based on the analysis, as you see in the report, staff found that the site plan basically satisfy all the requirements of site plan regulation as contained in Chapter 28, its zoning ordinance. And also, we found that subdivision plat basically meet all the requirements in the subdivision regulation in Chapter 38. Staff recommend approval of the proposed motion, which also includes 3 conditions. I think Mr. Starter mentioned. I will just read it on page 2 very quickly. One is that the applicant shall address the minor technical comments as attached in the staff comments table. And second, they need to revise the layout to reflect the new sidewalk design along the Park Avenue. And then the third condition basically asks the applicant to basically do additional design refinement for those elevations. Specifically, we believe they need to work on the windows, doors, and also the roof line, through the changes in color, material, and design features. So based on that, that's the recommendation. This concludes the staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zhang. The applicant is here. Do we take applicant presentations or anything you'd like to address the commission? Then we'll take questions from the commissioners.
I need to use the Flickr only works from here, apparently.
Yeah.
Can I use them?
Sure.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. It's good to be here and see you again. My name is Andrew Rosenberger. I'm with Madison Homes. I'm joined with Russ Rosenberger and Mark Westmoreland from Madison Homes, Jason Bryan from the Klinsky Group Architects, Karen White from Walter Phillips, who's our project engineer. First, I want to start by thanking Henry Zhang and staff for their hard work and their professionalism throughout this process. I can say that working with staff throughout this process and based upon our work session, it's resulted in a better project. But we're happy to be here to present this project to you and request your approval for the first site plan application in the newly amended and adopted T-zone. Off is, okay. Where am I pointing? You drive for now. Okay. So this is a site plan. This looks familiar. I'm not going to give you a full overview of the project, but I did want to touch on some highlights here. Still 12 units. We still have 6 fronting onto Park Avenue and 6 fronting onto a private mews on the south side. All the units are served vehicularly through a common alley accessed off of North Oak Street. This is a by right site plan application. It's in accordance with the revised T1 zoning ordinance. This application, it meets all the requirements for the ordinance, and we are not seeking any variances. We are not seeking any waivers from the Planning Commission. We comply with all the height, setback, open space, tree canopy, all of those requirements. We're also providing 1 off-street parking space per unit, which will be provided in private garages, and that is compliant with the zoning ordinance. At 12 units, we are below 34 units per acre, so no ADUs are required, and the average unit size then is limited to a maximum average net square feet of 1,500. We've also received a positive recommendation from the AAB in March. Good, it works. So again, I want to focus here on really 3 key areas of the project. These are based upon areas that we've discussed back in our March 20th work session, as well as what we've had with staff. It's Park Avenue frontage, the homes, the relation to the public realm and the sidewalk, the common alley serving the units, and then the mews along the southern end of the property. So let's jump into it. Maybe? Jack? So this is our frontage along Park Avenue. This looks pretty familiar, but there is some changes in some of the details as we go to the next slide. So this is a zoom in, a close-up of, that's lot 6. So fronting onto Park Avenue, lot 5 is then right to the right of that. In particular, I want to draw your attention to the 4 risers and the stoop going from the sidewalk up to the front door. This is actually not a change in our plan, but it's a change in our presentation. It was always there. Our renderings weren't quite as detailed before. So I think this really creates a more sense of entrance and enhances the front facade of the units. You can see we've also added a railing as well. We've also increased our color variation of the front doors and modified some of our brick details on the window surrounds. These changes are subtle, but we feel that they do have a positive impact on increasing the attractiveness and the variation of the units. And before we go to the next slide, I do want to draw your attention to the sidewalk as shown here. So this is consistent with our second submission. It's a 6-foot sidewalk with a 4-foot planting strip between the sidewalk and the back of the curb. You can see it also shows pretty substantial brick banding. On the next slide, then, so the bottom drawing is similar to what we just looked at. So that's consistent with our current site plan application. You can see the brick banding goes north and south and east and west, and the sidewalk with a 4-foot strip between the sidewalk and the curb. What's shown up above, then, is what we are actually proposing. And this brings the sidewalk out to the curb. So it eliminates a large portion of the planting strip between the sidewalk and the curb. Really makes all of that sidewalk. We're retaining all of the street trees, so all the street trees, same size, same quantity as before. They'll just be in tree pits as opposed to a continuous planting strip. In addition, the brick banding that's shown on the bottom and was shown on the previous slide has been scaled back and simplified. The brick ribs have been deleted, and there's now just, it's a little hard to see, but at the top you can see there's just a single brick band behind the curb, between the curb and the sidewalk, really. So instead of then the heavier brick banding in the walkway, in the main walkway, we're proposing a more detailed scoring pattern in the concrete. And that will show on the next slide. So these pictures up above, first the picture below, the image below is the same that we just looked at. But the pictures above are from a project that we completed in Arlington County. It's called Roslyn Key. It was 25 townhomes. And so this was really the inspiration for what we are doing on the sidewalks, and it just happens to jive perfectly with the streetscape standards that Falls Church has. So you can see on the left-hand side the brick banding, the single brick band behind the curb, between the curb and the sidewalk. And then you can also see the scoring pattern, which shows really in both of those photos. So it really serves, the scoring pattern really serves to break up some of the monotony of the concrete. It's a mix of smooth concrete along the joint lines and then a brushed concrete on most of the walking surface. So that's in lieu of the heavier brick banding. So this is the sidewalk that we've discussed with staff, and this is what will be incorporated into our final post-approval submission. So jumping to the second category is the alley. This is the common alley that serves all of the units. We'll start far, and then we'll from farther out, and then we'll zoom in. So in the next slide, this is just a closer up at the alley. So we're standing basically at the entrance to the alley, more or less along Oak Street. We've enhanced our design. We've enhanced our presentation in terms of, to make it more realistic in terms of matching the plans and what will actually be built. The first thing you notice in looking at this is what's missing. And what's missing are any utility meters. What's missing are any HVAC condenser units. We've managed to get those out of the alley completely and really create a much more attractive area. So instead of those items, we were actually able to include some low-level greenery on our curb islands, as you can see here. We were also showing decks along on the left-hand side, which is the back of units 1 through 6. We're not able to accommodate decks on units 7 through 12 just because of the distance needed for fire access. We're showing a brick band, as we're proposing, around the alley, as well as brick pavers on the driveway, which really create kind of a variation in materials and create a more attractive space. And then you can see at the end, there is a trellis that we're proposing, which is a visual terminus for the alley. I think the result overall is that this is really attractive space, not just for an alley, but I think it's attractive space in general. And then the next slide, we'll zoom in even closer and take a closer look at the trellis. So this is designed to have flowering vines growing on it. We'll plant those and they will grow over time. We'll also have accent lights, which will highlight this feature at night. And we feel that this feature really creates a visual terminus and ties the alley together. It'll also serve to screen the alley from the parking deck, which you can see in the background there. And this screening, this feature, will really only get better as time goes on, as the vines grow and it becomes more opaque. Next slide, I want to jump actually inside. This was addressing some of the questions that we heard at our work session. So this is a blow-up of our lower level. In specific, I want to highlight the garage. This is a mid-size sedan parked in the garage. You can see that our width just for the parking space is 12 feet 4 inches. So you can see there's quite a bit of room on either side to maneuver and getting in and out of the car, opening the doors, walking around. In addition, there's separate space in the lower right-hand corner for the trash and recycling, which gets those really out of the parking area. Henry touched on this next point, but if you go to the next slide, again, this is something that was discussed at the work session in terms of the access, in particular for Lot 6 and Lot 12. These are excerpts from our site plan. It's getting rather technical, but it does demonstrate that a mid-size sedan, so the exact same size car that we saw on the previous slide in the garage, can easily get in and out of these spaces. It can exit without doing a multi-point turn. So with that, I want to jump to the third section, our third focus area, which is the Muse. I think this slide really is a great representation of the relationship between the existing garage on the right, the townhomes that are proposed on the left, and then the Muse in the middle. We zoomed out, and then we'll zoom in and get a closer look and really soak up some of the details. So at the work session in March, I discussed several concepts and ideas that we thought that we could employ to make this space feel safe and attractive. This rendering really reflects the implementation of those concepts. We've added brick monuments to delineate the private space from the public realm. These will also have address signage on them and be illuminated. We've added an open rail fence along the property line, which is actually on top of a retaining wall. It really creates a physical boundary, but still leaves the space open without enclosing it. So it doesn't create some of that closed-in feel that you might otherwise expect. We've also added path lighting. As you can kind of see along the right hand of the sidewalk, it's low-level path lighting to illuminate the walk. And that combined with the lighting from the fronts of these units, which cannot be turned off from the inside, they'll be on a timer, will kind of maintain this space to be illuminated at its appropriate level. There is a dark spot that I think Henry referred to. We'll be addressing that in our post-submission. The next slide then, which is my final slide, at least of substance. This shows on a more technical basis, the relationship between the Muse, the garage, and the proposed units. This is looking from Lot 12, so this is the exact opposite of what we were looking at before, looking toward Park Avenue. This is at the point where the retaining wall, which is shown there in orange, is at its highest, which is 3.25 feet. And we really incorporated that retaining wall from the very beginning in an effort to raise that surface and bring it out from the depths and bring it up higher so it creates a more open, more sunlight within that Muse area. I do want to touch on a few dimensions here, just to provide some better context so you can understand this. The horizontal distance between the parking garage and the brick of our townhome is 20 feet. So each building is 10 feet from the property line. And then the vertical distance from our proposed sidewalk, which is kind of shown there in blue, you can see there's 2 people walking on it. The vertical distance from our sidewalk to the top of the garage on the left in yellow is 13.5 feet. And our sidewalk then is 4 feet higher than the lower surface parking on the left-hand side. So we acknowledge that this is a unique circumstance, having townhomes and a parking garage in this relationship. But we feel that we've taken the right steps to make this area feel attractive and make it inviting and safe for our residents and their guests. That really concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, the whole team, we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. And I agree with you, it's certainly improved. Appreciate, you can see a lot of the reflections of the council, of the commission's comments in the revision, and agree with the comment that, thank you to staff for the clarity of laying out the 5 main changes and then the 3 things that are still in front of us. So thank you for all that. I know we have a bunch of questions here from the commission, so let me just throw it open and see who wants to go first.
Mr. Chair,
Mr.
if I
Howard.
could, do you
Oh,
want to
sorry.
take questions from the commission now? Do you want to open it to your public hearing?
My apologies. We don't have to?
You don't have to. It's up to you how you want to do it.
To see if there's comments from the,
Yeah, I think typically you can do sort of clarifying questions from the commission, take it to public hearing, and then close the public hearing, and then have your discussion.
thank you. Let's start with clarifying questions then. Anything clarifying, technical before we can get in? Mr. Hyra.
Maybe clarifying questions. I don't know if I'm getting into the weeds too fast, but a couple. But I would just, overall, I would say you heard us, you listened to us. I mean, all the upgrades that you have made are related to most of the comments that came from this commission, maybe from elsewhere in Falls Church, but Jesus, I mean, you really listened and made substantial changes. So, one technical question, price per square footage. What are you thinking for this? Because you've upgraded this property, and I'm sure the numbers you threw out last time you were here and the numbers now have changed, but maybe not.
So let's see, price per square foot. So we're priced in the 9s, which is similar to what we were discussing last time.
900,000 per unit, right?
What's that?
900,000 per unit.
Gross, yes, $900,000
So-
per unit. I think that comes up to about $600,
Yeah.
give or take, in that realm per square foot.
Okay, and just one other clarifying question. Is there now going to be an amenity fee at all? Like you mentioned all these upgrades that you're making along the outside, and somebody's got to upkeep that. Is that part of this development, or is everybody got their own unit, and then the common amenities, how are they maintained?
So there will be an HOA here, and that HOA will maintain the common elements.
Do you know what the HOA approximately would be?
Like a monthly fee?
Yeah, how much? Yeah.
We haven't done a budget yet. There's nothing outrageous here in terms of cost. So a typical HOA fee, monthly assessment is between $150 and $200 a month per unit.
That's the only clarifying questions I had.
Thank you. Other clarifying questions for commissioners? Mr. Krasner?
I think it's clarifying. Just on the auto turn, and I appreciate you for providing the auto turn. I know I mentioned it among others last time. If we could pull that up, I mean, the way I'm reading the auto turn, I mean, it shows that it's still exceptionally tight, even with the mid-size sedan, to get out of 6. In fact, the auto turn shows it striking that curb as you reverse out. It shows the wheel striking the curb.
I don't think the wheel is striking the curb. The overhang of the car may be over the curb.
Well,
but
no,
the
that's
wheel
over
is
actually over
not
the door of the
striking it.
garage. I mean, the way I read it, I've seen diagrams like this before. It appears that the wheels are striking that curb that you have out. I don't know who prepared it. If that person's here, they can speak to it. I don't know who prepared that drawing.
Do you have any details on that, Karen?
It's an engineering question.
Karen
So,
White with Walter Phillips. Yeah, so agreed. So you are getting up there, and I can't see it that close here, but to think about it too. So I'm looking at the higher one, the upper image right now.
Yeah.
When I'm talking, and looking at Unit 12, and you're coming and you're backing out. So technically, your wheels are still in the shared drive aisle, and then the overhang of your car is going up over the driveway of the adjacent sorry. You're backing out of 6.
yeah, that's one that seems the most
Right,
problematic.
the driveway into 12, you are going over the driveway with the overhang of your car, but the wheels are in the shared drive, in the upper image. The lower image are the same, so you're coming in, you're backing out in the same. So the actual wheels, you can kind of see the 4 darker ovals, I guess. Those are in the shared, but you do overhang. The overhang does encroach out of the shared drive aisle.
I'm just wondering I mean, I know those curbs look nice because you're planting there, but I just wonder if you're setting it up for people to just get real frustrated and scratch their wheels. And I mean, we all know an engineer can design an auto turn that looks really great if you are driving on your computer and you line it up perfectly, but the average person, struggles a lot. I mean, you could argue it's kind of their problem, but if they damage their own car, but I just feel like and I know it's bothered me when we've had public or on our mixed-use projects, some garages that, again, were designed to be, only the perfect alignment can fit. I just think that it's still pretty tight, even for a mid-size sedan. And it's fine about the size of the garage. I guess people might self-select. You won't be able to, they'll park their larger cars out on the street. But for anyone who's going to try to park a car in there, it just seems that it's, I don't know, if the point of the ordinance is that it requires one parking spot and the parking spot is not convenient and adequate, people won't use it. And then it's like they didn't provide the parking spot. So that's just my concern that it's still too tight. And I don't know if the city folks, if the city engineer took a look at that to see if that meets it. But it just seems exceptionally tight and that it's going to set up a problem and make that garage, not very convenient or usable for that owner. So, I mean, it's my comment. I don't know. Yeah.
Any other clarifying questions from commissioners?
Just one, I guess, in that same vein. I don't have any sort of a point of comparison to this garage as opposed to, the garages of the $2.6 million house just down the street that's, being built. My impression from driving past it is, the $2.6 million house garage doesn't look like it would fit the SUV that inevitably is going to be living there. But, I mean, is what you have designed here consistent with what you have done in other projects, or are we pushing the envelope here? To some degree, I'm okay pushing the envelope.
We've done a very similar arrangement on other projects. Again, this is, if you drive an extra large SUV, I would not recommend purchasing either Lot 6 or Lot 12. It's not meant for that. I mean, in general, I don't even know whether they would, at some point, you can only design so much. If you design for a Tahoe, then someone comes with their Tesla, whatever their truck is called. Well, why can't you park that? So, we've designed it for a mid-size sedan, which is actually a pretty decently sized car. It could be a Honda Accord, it could be a Toyota Highlander, I think, which is an SUV, but similar dimensions. So it's not, that's not a Fiat. It's not a tiny European car. It's a reasonably sized car. It's a little tighter than the other spaces. It's very possible to get in and it's very possible to get out. We've done this before in other urban environments. We're not reinventing the wheel, so to speak, with this scenario.
So in your experience, this is a saleable dwelling
Yes.
for the right buyer.
Yes.
It's not going to be an impediment to, units at the end sitting empty, which is not obviously desirable.
We certainly want to avoid that scenario.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions, Mr. Freelander?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do appreciate you taking the time to really address some of the comments that we saw or that we had. I do share some of the same concerns about the parking and the garage, because the garage is actually 16-foot 1 clear, but the overall length of the vehicle that you're showing is 16.18. So it's very tight. That's like, you know.
The garage was 18 clear.
An inch. Oh, I'm sorry, I saw it as 16-foot 1. If it's 18-foot 1, that's
I
great.
thought it was,
Then you can get your trash can around your car. So, is that 18-foot 1?
18 feet clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I still share the same concerns about the tightness of that. But I do acknowledge that we are trying to move to smaller vehicles and all of that. But my questions more had to do with, I have a couple about the site. One is the streetscape that you've proposed, right? You originally had landscaping and grasses with those trees, and now that you're proposing and I think it's probably the rendering, that one. Now that you're proposing the sidewalk that goes out and the street trees, are those grasses, are you still going to put those grasses in those street tree grates? And then who maintains those out there since they're out along the street?
So certainly the street trees as shown will remain. We were showing some more planting in that strip in general.
Yeah.
That will certainly be restricted. It's likely, we haven't kind of gotten to that point yet in terms of refining the landscape plan. There's likely to be some low-level shrubs or grasses. In this case, the HOA, we would commit that the HOA would maintain that area.
Just to make sure that it's still lush and, okay. And then my other question too is around those bioretention planters in front of the homes. I saw some of the comments and the responses saying that each one is going to be identified and prescribed for that owner. Are there going to be variations that the owners can choose from, or is it's a prescribed arrangement that the HOA just does and people are kind of stuck with whatever's there?
You're talking about the arrangement of the plantings within
Yeah,
the
just so that there's some
bioretention?
variation, because we're talking about like identifying each individual unit
Right.
along Park, right? And so is there something that those owners can express themselves with in those plantings, knowing though that it's a bioretention? So are there plants that they can choose from that they say, I want this, or I want this, or I want this, versus my neighbor who's got
Sure.
nothing that blooms, right?
Right. So they will be planted in accordance with the landscaping plan. And given that they are bioretention facilities, they will not be able to, residents will not have the option to customize what's planted in there. The species that are planted in there were specifically selected because they can withstand the conditions. It gets very wet, it gets very dry in those areas. And so in addition, the soil, it's a special soil. It's a scientifically composed medium specifically to handle and drain at the appropriate rate. So there's really no customization, and I don't think it would be appropriate to do that, just given the function that those perform. We don't want to do anything that would inhibit that.
Clog them, yeah. No, I understand the functionality requirement of those. I was just curious, as we're talking about how to create different identities within this larger piece, what are some ways that we can do that? And then the shrubs along the southern Mews. So those, now that they've grown in from the winter, they are very thick.
Yes. They're actually, what's currently planted is actually even thicker than what's shown on this slide, for example. It's very lush.
It is very lush. And I wonder what would happen, since that retaining wall is literally, you're going to be building right on that property line, how that affects those shrubs if those shrubs don't survive that, what's Plan B? Is this what Plan B is? And are you going to create something there if they don't survive the construction?
First of all, I don't think that anything that we are doing will cause any detriment to those existing plantings. Could they get trampled during construction? Yes. In that case, we would obviously replace them. But I don't think that in terms of their long-term viability, there's nothing that we are doing. It's not like there's, 60-foot tall oak trees that are in there with these massive root zones. Most of what's in there is while it's lush, it is relatively modest in size, and we won't be doing anything that would threaten the viability of those plantings.
Sure. I just want to make sure that while we're utilizing that instead of like a gardenscape, for those residences to look at in lieu of looking at the parked cars in the garage, that we're thinking about that in case they do not survive through construction activities.
Yes. We have a vested interest in keeping that landscape buffer as healthy and as viable as possible.
I appreciate the cross-section that you showed, because I was
Good.
looking for that, especially to kind of see what is that overall height at the top of the rail when you're at unit 12? Is it?
Right.
It's 7 feet from grade?
It's approximately 7 feet from grade. It's a 3.25-foot retaining wall and then a
The guardrail.
3.5-foot tall rail.
Okay. And then as you get to Oak, that slope comes up. So what is it at its height at Oak Street?
So,
like 4
go back
feet?
one, Jack. So the wall basically terminates directly into that pier on the right where the addresses are at 0.
Okay.
So at that point, the sidewalk is, more or less on grade with
Okay.
the hotel property.
Okay. All right. So and it's slowly.
And the sidewalk is flat. So
Right.
if you were looking at it, the sidewalk is flat. It's the grade on
the
the
grade that
hotel
goes-
property that's
yeah.
coming up.
Okay, I get you. No, I do appreciate you taking a look at that, because I
Mm-hmm.
was a little bit concerned about activity that could come up, especially in the darkness. And so I'm glad that I agree with staff, taking a look at those foot candles and making sure that we've got some even lighting
Yep.
back there. I think that's it for questions for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freelander. Other questions from the commissioners?
Other questions, but they're not clarifying.
Okay. All right, well, let's open up then for a public hearing. Mr. Train, do we have anybody here who's here to speak on this item?
I haven't received any slips, Mr. Chair.
Is there anybody here who's here to speak on this item? Do we have any written comments?
No, sir.
Okay, then we will close the public hearing, and we'll turn it over to commissioners for other questions and comments. Mr. Stevens, start with you.
Okay, Mr. Rosenberger, is that right? Yeah. What Henry Zhang has proposed is indicating that the planning director would take over and react to certain items administratively. Are you okay with what they're proposing on those items?
Yes, is the short answer. We've talked about the sidewalk. The technical comments, we're working through those with staff. I think those are kind of typical engineering issues. The last item, which relates to the architecture and the design and some of the fenestration elements, we have bounced some stuff off of staff. We're working with them. I think we found some common ground that we can work with and have some, maybe not full agreement, but we're getting on the same page, and I think that we can address those issues.
Yeah, I think I counted about 7 items that
Yeah,
weren't
and that's not to
closed
say that there's not going to be some minor technical items that we need to discuss, but it's nothing that can't be resolved among reasonable people.
out. Okay. I just want to make sure that we weren't kind of deferring things that maybe the Planning Commission should be looking at, and, kind of deferring those to staff. If you're okay with it, then I
Yes.
guess I am as well. A question on the, this is probably for Mr. Zhang. On the photometric study, and where does the 1.25, and I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with this, there was some reference to a CPTED principles. I'm just wondering, could you just briefly explain what that is? And is the 1.25, it's not some arbitrary number, but is there some kind of, science that backs that?
Yes, for the record, this is Henry Zhang with Planning Division. Yes, 1.25 is just a normal foot candle rating for the general visibility. It's very widely used. The CPTED principle, that's the, crime prevention through environmental design. One of the principles is that you have sufficient lighting in order to have visual of anything happened. If it's too dark, we'll not be able to fail safe. So that's basically that principle. I worked more than 20 years in Maryland. We have all those, let's say, townhouse parking. If you have a bunch of townhouses, and then all the pedestrian path, we always use this 1.25. That's in our zoning code. Back then. Here, I didn't see anything. I just tried to use best practice, just to make sure we have sufficient lighting level in order for people to feel safe.
Okay, is the applicant all right with that?
I actually talked to that.
Sure.
When I was answering your previous question, I said that there were still some minor details that needed to be worked out. You hit on one of them. So we agree that there are some dark spots within that that we fully intend to address. The feedback that we're getting from our lighting consultant is that 1.0 candlelight, foot candle, I guess it's called, is the appropriate metric that we should be designing to, not 1.25. Particularly given the residential setting of this. So that's an issue that I think we need to resolve, but that's the feedback that we're getting from our lighting consultant, that it's 1.0 is the more appropriate metric that we should be designing to.
Well, I'm being educated on all of this, so.
Not the only one.
If I may, I think there are two types of lighting fixtures proposed. One is the bowler lighting, which basically along the whole path.
Can we pull up that detail? Don't you have, it's in the plan, right? Can we pull
It's in the plan. It's in the plan.
Can we pull up the lighting detail?
There's another one is building attached. We call it sconce. Basically, that's lighting. I don't think they have the lighting study we have. We have here in the submittal. Looks like may not include those sconce. So to me, if maybe include all the lighting fixtures, both freestanding and
You'd get up
attached
to
to the building,
1.25 then, huh?
they may have enough rating. So, as I said, since the city does not have anything written in the zoning code, so that's up to planning commission's discretion to deviate from what proposed 1.25 by the staff, and then their lighting consultant, proposed 1.2. So basically 0.25 difference.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know that we can resolve that here since we don't have anything in our code. I was just concerned that we not pick some kind of an arbitrary number, kind of thinking about parking spaces, restaurants, every 200 square feet, you need a parking space. That sort of thing is rather arbitrary, and I didn't want to see that extended into lighting. But if you're both confident that you can resolve this in some way, maybe for the future, it would be good to have some kind of a standard rather than this way. That's about it. So, okay. Did you have?
Before we have the lighting finally pulled up, do you want to?
Well, I just wanted to, since we're talking about the lighting, and actually just kind of like a point of order. I know, let's be clear what the process is here as far as, what we want to defer, what we can defer to staff, and what needs to be decided as part of the site plan. The planning commission approves the site plan. So a site plan, I'm okay with, again, technical cleanup stuff, typos, things that there's complete agreement on from the staff to the applicant staff saying, you need to fix this. The applicant says, sure, no problem. Yeah, that can be a condition of approval. But I don't know how comfortable I am personally about deferring like design issues on a site plan to the staff level. And the other point, and this is the question, I guess, is that if it's not in the ordinance, how much leeway does staff actually have to require the site plan to provide one or the other? I mean, that's a question for Mr. Zhang or Mr. Stoddard. If we don't have a standard in our ordinance, what legal authority do we have to require a particular, illumination level in this setting?
If I may,
Either one of you, whoever wants to answer it.
Henry Zhang was planning. Actually, under the state code of Virginia, most of the jurisdiction doesn't have this site plan approved by the Planning Commission. They basically designate a site plan agent, which is staff. They did that they do that all the time. I think the city has a special requirement, Planning Commission approve the site plan.
There are many jurisdictions in Virginia that do all kinds of things.
Yes.
We live here, so we're working with the rules that we have here. So, yeah, I'm very familiar with what other counties, towns, and cities do
Yes.
throughout the Commonwealth. But we were talking about the City of Falls Church's ordinance, which
Yeah.
does require the Planning Commission to approve the site plan. So in
Yes.
this case, we're the site plan agent. If
Yes.
you want to use that term. So, so that's my question, and I don't know if you've answered it. Maybe Mr. Stoddard wants to help you. I mean, what's the legal authority that we have to require a particular illumination level? We can suggest it, I suppose, but can we require a level that a particular level if the applicant's opposed to it if it's not in the ordinance?
Well, I think, as was mentioned sort of earlier, this idea of sort of reasonable people sort of coming to sort of a conclusion here. There are requirements on lighting. There's a maximum that lighting can spill over into a neighbor. That's property that's specified in the city code. There's a minimum that's required for any walkway that's actually specified in the ADA code. So there are various minimums and maximums that are already in play. And so what we're looking at, I think, is the specifics for this setting. I think, as was mentioned, a lot of this can be fixed with the specific light fixtures, right? Obviously, you don't want the light shining back into the homes. So I think some of this is just working through the final details on, how are the lighting fixtures designed? What is the photometric plan showing? And I think some of this is the typical stuff that gets worked out as part of final engineering or final site design or a tenant fit out, whether it's an administratively approved project or a site plan approved project. So it sounds like the numbers are pretty close to each other, and I think some of it is just working through the details that's pretty typical for final permitting and building plan.
I guess I'd be concerned if something like this, kind of stalled the project in some way, because it created an impasse that we couldn't get over in such a way that it might delay the project. So, hopefully we could be flexible and since we don't have something specific in our
I
code.
was concerned how much we can, if we're approving the site plan with that sheet that shows it that way, how much room does staff have or the applicant to change it after we vote? That's the concern I have, since it's on the plan, we're approving the plan. So, like I said, obviously there can be small adjustments, I guess, that are, staff could interpret as consistent with the approval, but, and I don't know, this may fall into that, it may be minor enough, but I just don't know what the code says about that. I've read the part of our ordinance that talks about the site plan process, but.
There are things that change. There are things that change post-planning commission approval, right? Sort of, council votes on a CDP for a special exception, and then it gets finalized at site plan. Planning commission votes on a site plan, and then it gets refined, through the building permit. But obviously, these things all stay true to the intent, the vision, sort of the overall scope of the project, right? Nothing in that approval is changing, but it's common for people to clarify, we need this diameter pipe instead of that diameter pipe, and this thing needs to, right, we missed on the Stratford Garden, right? We accidentally approved a fire hydrant in the middle of the sidewalk, so we're moving the hydrant, we're moving the sidewalk to make sure we've got ADA access. So these kinds of things sort of pop up, they get missed at site plan, we catch them, ideally before they get constructed so that so no one's out any cost. But it is common for these cleanups to happen post-action.
Sure, yeah, agree with that, but, site plan is one level of specificity beyond a, CDP or what we might see with special exception. I mean, so we're at a site plan level here, so, this is going to control when they file their building permits. So I don't know. I mean, I think that it'd be great if we could come to some resolution. I don't know how, I mean, my commissioners, I'm just one, my commissioners may not agree with me, but I don't know how comfortable I am deferring, sort of design elements where there's a disagreement amongst the parties to a staff level debate. I mean, same thing goes for the architecture while we're on that topic. I mean, that comment is sort of vague. I mean, obviously, and I'm not sure again how much of the site
Can we finish
plan
the lighting
does
piece
that.
first?
Sure, yeah, we
Before
can.
you go? Just
Yeah.
if you're cut off on,
I still have one more, but.
I'm sorry.
on the lighting thing, we'll just,
No, not on lighting. I think I'm okay with,
let's go, let's let
Sure,
Mr.
I'm
Stevens
sorry.
finish, we'll go around.
The last item I had has to do with the letter that we got from the Urban Forestry Commission and the interest in wanting to see use of native plants continue in the future. Now, I don't know that we can go in and designate what HOA documents should be, but I was just wondering, Mr. Zhang, is there something we could put in the site plan that would indicate use of native plants? I know, for example, the site plan of the townhouse community where I live has got a requirement on certain trees, certain tree specimens. So if one dies, it has to be replaced with a specified species. I'm just wondering, given our ongoing interest in native plants, is that something that could be added to the site plan so that the HOA in the future, if they need to replant anything, that they would be using native species?
For the record, this is Henry Zhang. I think we're talking about two things here. One is the frontage. Basically, city will enter a streetscape maintenance agreement with the applicant. So that's the place we definitely going to strike for all the native species or cultivars. I think we had a conversation among the staff, basically me, Mr. Stoddard, with the arborist. So for those part, frontage maintenance will be taken care by the streetscape agreement. And then for the things on the side, I believe that's the question for the development team. I believe they also want to use the native species and cultivars, so that can be included. I believe as a site plan approval with the HOA, they're going to have a covenant submitted for city review before they do the recording along with the deed document, so we can.
And they could specify use of native
Yeah,
plants at
maybe
that
if
point?
they're agree upon,
Yeah.
if they're agree upon, we can put that specifically in the covenant. Basically says any future replacement had to be native species.
Okay.
Or cultivars.
I think that would pretty much resolve everything I had then. So, thanks.
Thank you. Good on that?
So just quickly, I think the landscaping is going to be dictated by the landscaping plan. So we would plant what's shown on the landscaping plan. If something were to die and need to be replaced, it would need to be replaced by the same species. I believe that all of the species that we're showing on our planting plan are native species. So that really kind of, hopefully addresses your question.
Yeah, no, it was actually the Urban Forestry Commission that had taken the time to advise us on that, and I felt like we should at least acknowledge it. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Mr. Krasner?
I mean, related to the other comment, just the architecture question. I mean, I guess the question, I don't know, again, what level of changes we're talking about. And I don't know, again, how my fellow commissioners feel about deferring that, but to staff to sort that out. I feel like if the commission is satisfied with the architecture, then we should approve it that way and it should be built that way. If we're not, then we should, and we agree with staff or we have some third opinion, then we should talk about that tonight. But to me, that's a key issue and not something that I'd be comfortable deferring to a staff level discussion. Not that I disagree with staff's comments, actually. I mean, I think I generally align myself with them, but, I think that's something we should discuss, in my view. So just more of a comment than a question. I think that to me is beyond the scope of what I would typically think would be something we would defer to staff to sort out as an engineering detail. Like to use Mr. Stoddard's fire hydrant analogy, this is a little bit more, I think, sort of, it's a little different than that. So anyhow, that's my comment. I think we should talk about that. I generally agree with staff's view on that, but maybe we need to sort that out better with the applicant to see if they're really amenable to that or not. And I don't, so.
You're referring to the third item, the third outstanding.
The third bullet, right, or number 3 in there, in the proposed motion, talks about refined elevations that better define windows and doors. I mean, I think I understand what the staff is recommending, and like I said, I don't think I fundamentally disagree with it, but if the applicants expressed reservation on it, which is what I heard them say, then I don't know where that leaves it. Either we approve it with the, what's in the site plan that shows the elevations, and we expect to see that get built, or we're satisfied, or not, or we ask them for changes that would address whatever concerns we might have. I just don't know if I feel comfortable deferring to staff to sort it out. I think we should decide that at this level, in my opinion.
You have other commissioners on that, too. Any other comments? Mr. Hyman? You go. Oh, sorry.
I just have a couple comments, and they're not necessarily for the applicant. They are for our staff, they are for our council, they are for us as planning commissioners when we think about this development. This is our first T-zone development. We had a lot of discussions about the missing middle as a rationale for why we should be doing this, and some definitions of the missing middle are height. So we have high-rises on Broad, and we're coming down to Park, so we're doing some lower elevation buildings. But there is also something in the definition of missing middle as affordability. And we've had a lot of discussions about affordable housing, and affordable housing was considered in the zoning change that we made on this plot and other plots that are these now transition zones, T-zones. So what are we really getting? So we thought we would get $800,000 townhomes. We're getting $900,000 townhomes. We're getting townhomes that cost $900,000, and when you think about a 7% interest rate right now on a 30-year fixed mortgage, somebody needs to have an income, a median family, or an income of $180,000, $170,000. That's what we're building with our T-zones. And this is probably this is at the beginning, right? So this is probably the lowest price we're going to get, $900,000. By the time this gets built, it's not going to be $900,000. It's going to probably be higher. I don't think interest rates are changing. So the median household income in Falls Church in 2022 is $164,000. We're building homes that some think in our town are affordable beyond our household median income. This is not affordable housing. Our median sale price in 2024 is about $777,000. We are way above that with $900,000. $600 per square foot. That is incredibly expensive. There's a market for this. You guys know it. You're building it. You know if you build this, somebody's going to come and turn in their Tahoe and get a little Tesla and fit in the alley and be able to walk to Dominion, be able to walk to other amenities that are right there. So there's a market for this, no question. And what are we going to get as a city? Well, we're going to get 12 townhomes. We're going to generate over 30 years at least $4 million plus in property tax revenue. And it's going to be higher than that because the value of these homes or these townhomes is going to go up. Our property taxes will probably go up. But what are we really doing? Are we doing anything on the affordable housing front? Who are we helping? And who do we want to come into our town? We already saw the projections that higher income people keep coming. Higher income people keep coming here, and lower income people keep leaving and keep leaving and keep leaving. And we're like, God, we're baffled by this. Like, how does this keep happening in the Little Falls Church? This is how it happens. By this development and all the other developments we do. So again, please, don't think that there's some market force here that is driving what is happening. I said this last time. It is our decisions that are determining the future of Falls Church. The future of Falls Church is high-income people. And that's it, because that's what we're building for. So, you know, we need to be real cautious and careful when we throw out terms like missing middle, affordable housing. This is not it. And I just want it to be clear, I'm not voting for this proposal, and this is why. And it really doesn't have much to do with the development team. They have done exactly what is in our code. They have done what is in our zoning, and they have done a product that is in demand, and they're going to make a pretty substantial profit. And we are going to get more tax revenue to fix our sewers, to throw some money to the schools. But we've done zero on affordable housing, and we've made this community more and more exclusive. This is not why I joined the Planning Commission. This is not who I am and what I'm about. And I would ask that we do a deep consideration of how to truly get affordable housing. But make no mistake about it, this is not affordable housing. This is luxury housing for rich people. And it's nice. Like I said, I'd like to buy in. Maybe I'll be an investor. It looks great. It's a great investment. But this is not about diversity. This is about exclusivity, and we are about to approve this. So I'm not going to be voting for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ira. Ms. Freelander?
You're a tough act to follow. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're a tough act to follow, Mr. Ira. I'm going to bring it back just a minute. I did want to thank you for responding to our questions. Not a lot of the renderings changed to kind of show a uniqueness of place that we were asking for during the work session, especially along Park Avenue, and kind of looking at how those units kind of self-identify as their own. I understand we want to, it's a tight site. I understand we want to keep some kind of uniformity, but I think it's really important to have a unique sense of place that shows that these are townhomes and not an apartment building with a bunch of extra doors across the front. So I think that it still reads very monolithically, and if we could bring up the rendering on, I guess, the front page would be good, that faces Park. So I think I like what you're trying to do with the bay windows, and I can see how you're trying to break up that cornice line, but then along the parapet, you're tying that back together as one big mass, and so I'd really like to kind of see that break up, and maybe that will help start to identify that these are separate units. And maybe that means pulling one down, pushing one up, maybe not in the same rhythm that you have, just because I feel like you've set up some symmetry along Oak, which Oak is very symmetrical along that elevation, but when you come around Park, it's not symmetrical. And it's kind of this alternating thing, and what happens on that corner gets to be a little bit lost in that language. You look like you want to say something, please.
Yes. So we talked about comment number 3 that staff had talked about some of the architectural refinements similar to what you're proposing right now. And what we've come up with and what we've kind of bounced around, and I think I shared it with Paul at 4 o'clock today, which was the first I got it. I don't have it that I can show on the screen, but they're small changes. But for example, on the two, for lack of a better term, call them the gray units, where we're adding some lighter accent brick on the surrounds of the windows. as well as an accent brick, which is currently shown as the same color. So I think that will really help to differentiate those units. And then on the parapet, what we are also looking at, and what we had done a quick rendering of, basically dropped two of the parapet walls by about a foot and put a railing up there. So it really served to do exactly what I think you're saying in terms of breaking up some of that mass. And I think those are the details when staff says that we need to work it out, and we say that we need to work it out. Those are what we're talking about. I mean, we're not making wholesale changes. We're not proposing wholesale changes. But it's really small refinements like that, adjusting the parapet line on a few units, adding some brick accent colors, items like that.
So, speaking of the materials, and you mentioned that these are brick surrounds. Is it at the bay windows? Like, what is around those bay windows? What is that material?
That is not brick. It's
Metal panel, or is it?
it's a panel. I think there's some cementitious material in there as well.
So what I'm seeing here is some units that look like they want to be more modern and clean from the outside, and some that, and then the bay, and then you've introduced the bay window that kind of has like a more traditional kind of molding, right? And so I almost wonder if maybe we're mixing language, especially as we wrap around the building, that maybe we should, to make the windows here, like say for example on this, I guess brown brick or tan brick versus the peachy brick. So you've got the windows in the peachy brick, everything's very modern, clean lines, right? But you've got over that door, you've got like this traditional molding that you are now showing also on the bay window of the unit next door, along with the traditional molding at that door. So I would almost want to see, if you're going to make them different, make them kind of consistent among themselves, right? So one is more modern and clean lines, right? And then the other one has window surrounds that are kind of matching that bay window kind of language, right? Rather than introducing in this brown one or the tan one, you've got the modern, clean, punched window right next to a more traditional bay window. So I almost want to see that language be, one townhouse is more traditional, and you've repeated, and I'm not saying put a surround all the way around that window, but maybe there's some kind of detailing at the head or at the sill of that window that starts to bring some of that more traditional feel to those windows.
Jason Bryan, I'm from the architecture firm, Kalinsky Group, that worked on these designs. I think part of this is a frustration on everyone's part of graphics are a tough representation in a hearing like this. I think the best way to look at some of the details that you're talking about are probably the 2D color renderings. I hate to make you go to another packet and attachment, but there is actually a significant amount of brick detailing on these elevations that don't necessarily show up in a full light wash rendering. For instance, there are roll-lock sills across the board on all of these windows. There's soldier course headers on all of the windows across the board. There is kind of a consistency in brick detailing. However, the more pink reddish units, there's a projected brick banding on the sides of those windows and a double-stepped header on those. So if we can kind of zoom in tight on those.
And I see that, but I wonder why you would repeat something very similar, say for window type A, that's like the double hung window in the tan versus the peachy.
Well, they
right?
all are double hung windows. It's just the first floor is double hung windows with a transom above. It is double hung windows throughout.
Right.
And that's what I mean, like kind of in the rendering, it gets dark under that bay and starts to look like a dark recess punched opening. But that is an opening with a brick soldier course header, a roll-lock sill, traditional window, just like the rest on the elevation.
I can see that. I can see that, and I think maybe that's what's confusing to me, because I actually see too much of the same across every unit, right? So So say, for example, above door number 711 and 713 doors here are treated exactly the same, but they're very different in the style that you've got some more modern and clean punched openings with, yes, you're doing the brick coursing, which is, I think it's great, but when you go to the tan unit above 711, I almost want to see those two windows above that start to reflect a little bit of the detailing that you see in that bay window. I'm not saying go all the way around it. I'm saying just bring some of that materiality to those windows to kind of tie those windows to that unit. Right? Because really, it's a victory in color at this point that separates
Right.
one unit from the next. If it's all the same brick color, that looks like an apartment building to me.
Right, and
So-
I do think that is what we were starting to get at in kind of sidebar discussions with staff is we had looked at, for the two gray units, for instance, with the bays, a brick header that was matching the color of that bay, which read more of as a precast header, an element that brought that, not only the color, but a little bit of punch on that particular style for that unit. We really liked that change. I think it was a productive change, probably something we're going to incorporate moving forward. And then the other element would be these two pink units. That top line parapet wall moving down a full foot
So that you-
with a foot of rail above it, a much more transparent, clean look above, and it gives you that kind of sawtooth townhouse elevation look that breaks up that kind of hard ceiling across.
I think that will help a lot to give some variation in that height, just so that they start to read individually from far away. But I still think that there needs to be a little bit more uniqueness to each one in their own true elevation, so that you know it's not just one big building inside, right? The corner that faces, can we go back to that rendering at the corner?
Which, do you remember which,
Park and Oak.
was that in the slideshow
It was
or?
in the slideshow.
Okay,
There we go, that one.
thanks.
So if you can zoom out. So this, just kind of speaking to that same language, this little corner piece is lost to me. Like, it doesn't belong to either the traditional bay window type unit or the modern one, because the entry is treated differently on Oak, right? So those kind of need to feel like they're their own separate thing, because they are different. They have corner units. And I think, too, when I look at this from the pedestrian point of view, I'm confronted with this large expanse of brick along that corner, which is very much exposed and will be exposed for a long time, because no street trees are going to be able to be planted along Oak, because I think there's a storm sewer main that's right there. So I would almost want to see more window opening rather than brick at that corner. And so by that very nature, and, I mean, I would think that's actually good for the sale of that unit, and I'm sorry, Mr. Hyra, but since this is a by right, I want to make sure that we're getting something from the street and pedestrian experience that is a unique sense of place, but also something that, people are going to want to be hanging around, right?
Absolutely.
And so I would think that a corner unit in a townhouse structure with lots of light, that's the whole point of a corner unit, right? So I kind of questioned why we have these tiny little windows which repeat the same language along Park, but it's not really the same type of unit either. So that's why I was a little bit confused that it starts to read as a big mass, and I'm trying to figure out, like, how can it be more unique and have each little unique sense of place.
Understood. And I don't want to come off as dismissive of the comments or ignoring it, but, in my project notes throughout this process, this has been a question of balance, right? Of, yes, we do a lot of townhouse work in and around Northern Virginia. Yes, you want that kind of open feel on that first floor. However, there's the other angle of privacy and exposure, especially on a corner unit. The wash of headlights turning the corner, it's very disruptive and can be pretty irritating to residents.
But also in this kind of townhouse typology, that first floor is really more than 50% garage and a small living space, and you got to get a powder or bathroom in there. So wide open windows are not conducive for the bathroom, and we're really left with one single space on that floor. So we're working hard to try to optimize that space, but somehow get furniture and livability in all of this space on a first floor. A first floor of a townhouse is a pretty big challenge, and a corner unit actually, in some ways, is more difficult, even though counterintuitively you're thinking, well, there's so much more opportunity. But those windows really make it quite difficult to furnish the interior. So some of that is a reflection of trying to strike a balance between this livability, the aesthetics, the architecture, the zoning, all of that. That's our job, is to try to keep all of those plates in the air. So
I understand where you're coming from. I just think it's a lost opportunity. You've got a big blank brick wall that's 3 stories high that faces Oak Street, where you have a great opportunity at a corner. It's just, to me, it's a lost opportunity to not express that. And looking at the floor plan, it doesn't look like you've got little spaces in that corner. So I don't know. That's just me. So I would want to see a little bit more expression than a brick wall on a prime corner on Park Avenue. And I think that does it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freelander. Ms. Coma?
Was Mr. Duncan?
Oh, sorry. Let's go back and forth.
We'll go back and forth. I just have a few smaller comments. I wanted to thank you also for your responsiveness to our previous comments. I want to thank all my colleagues for their comments and expertise. There was one thing I was wondering about is the sidewalk on Oak. It was not depicted in is that going to match the sidewalk on Park with the sort of updated look?
So it was always designed to be a different sidewalk, a different detail along Oak than what's along Park. I think if you look in the streetscape standards, and I'm not going to get the terminology right here, but Park is one type of street, Oak is another type of street. So they do get different treatments. What's shown along Oak will basically remain the same extent, the same form, but we will try to, it will then rhyme with the concrete pattern that's on Park Avenue,
So you'll keep
if that
that
makes
brick
sense.
banding,
We
the
would keep
original
a single,
sort of
we would
design.
eliminate what's shown there in terms of some of the brick banding. We would simplify it to really match more with what we're reflecting along Park Avenue.
But you'll
But
keep
we won't, there will still be that strip there.
The
And
landscape
part of that's
strip.
driven by the utility poles, which exist in those spaces, as well as just the different typology of the streets and the different treatments they get in terms of the streetscape and the sidewalk.
Okay. I don't have a concern about it.
Okay.
I was just
Yep.
curious about whether they would match. And then the other question I had is there was a staff comment about ADA ramps. Maybe Mr. Zhang can speak to this. I think there was a question about whether the other ramps, the receiving ramps, would need to be replaced, and the response from the applicant was that the city had just replaced them in 2020. And I was just wondering if staff was satisfied with that answer.
Yes, for the record, my name is Henry Zhang with Planning Department. Yeah, it's one of the DPW's comments, and I had a conversation with the reviewer. Basically said what they need is that they need additional justification to, if not provided, and then they need to see why. It's on the attachment, on the staff comments, I think at 2.A attachment, I think it's on the page, under the transportation comments. I think if you turn to page comment number 4 on the sheet 0401. They just say comments not resolved, but they need require the applicant to submit a memo justify the proposal for the future review.
So are the ramps that the city installed in 2020, do those not sort of meet our current ADA requirements?
Yes,
I'm like just confused, like why whatever we built a few years ago does not.
Okay, I'm
It's not-
fortunate enough tonight to have Mr. Bradley here, so he will answer your question.
Yeah, so the ramps are ADA compliant with the layout of the new sidewalk and the work being done. They're just not going to survive construction. Simply put, they might need new alignment. Right, it's not uncommon to have to take stuff out to accommodate a new development. There's not, if this development were not to go forward, the ramps could stay until there's an ADA update. But with the ongoing development, it just makes sense to make sure we've got the best alignment and just kind of redo it all.
So they're replacing the ramp at Park and Oak, right at that corner, but then the receiving ramps, I guess, those might be impacted?
So I don't, and we haven't chatted about this personally. So we are updating the ramp that we are touching
Correct.
on our corner.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much, we're not touching the other receiving ramps, so they will not be
Okay.
damaged during construction.
Correct, just the ones in the corner.
Yeah, the one we're, on
Yeah,
our
that
corner.
they're doing, that's fine.
redoing,
The
yes.
comment I think that I read was about the receiving
Comments
ramps
about the
needing.
receiving ramps on the other side that were done at St. James in 2020.
In 2020, and so-
Visually looking at, just seeing what's there, I think there are some existing, okay.
Under the new ProWAG standards,
Yes,
you're required
correct.
to
There was a reference to that.
in essence, if you touch one ramp, you have to do the other ramp. So we're simply asking the development team to confirm for the record, as part of the project.
I see.
That the ramps are compliant.
That the ramps are up
Yes,
to date,
that's-
meet
yes.
all requirements.
Sorry, I missed that.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Those were all the small questions for me.
Thank you, Ms. Comant.
As
Mr. Duncan?
opposed to the big questions, or what more have we got?
Cleanup hitter.
Thank you. Looking on the bright side, which I do try to do, thanks first to the applicant and the staff for tackling this challenging site with, a new sort of product that we haven't seen in the city in a long time. I think there's something in everything that I've heard that should satisfy, some of the concerns at least expressed by those who have concerns. I think it's good to hear the discussion about the architecture, because I agree with Mr. Krasner that I feel like, delegating the decision about whether it has a more contemporary look or a more traditional look is an important thing to delegate. And I would be more comfortable if we had been brought something that had that resolved. I feel like candle power and some of the other issues that were called out are eminently resolvable. The other architectural matters are a little more difficult and speak to what each of us brings to this. I mean, I tend to drive and look at other projects that are, similar to this, and, Graham Park over on Route 50 and the complex up on the hill just as you come up into Arlington from Falls Church. And, sometimes they try a little bit too hard to express themselves as particular. They look a little fussy to my tastes. I like the cleaner lines, the more modern approach. But that's me. But to have the discussion here is good, and I guess my question to staff is, on that point in particular, where are we? I mean, how far away are we? And this goes to my chief concern, which is, when we adopted the T-zone revisions, it was to essentially attract projects like this and to try to give them approval that, if not expedited, at least was speedier than the SE process that we've used for most of the traditional mixed-use developments. So, the post-approval review, the post-approval submission that was referred to, how long is that going to take? Because my interest in this is trying to, resolve reasonable concerns, but also to show forward movement, to show the market that, we want more projects like this, and we are serious about trying to give them a review process that enables them to be approved within a season, rather than go on and on and on about them. So, do we feel if we voted tonight, as staff is asking us, that the process on the architectural side particularly is days away, weeks away? I mean, I don't want to, I'd rather not start June still arguing about fenestrations and so forth.
I couldn't agree more.
The solution, and I'll be quiet and let you answer the question I just posed, but, I'd like to get on to the business of dealing with how to bring more affordable housing into the city. And with that, I agree with Mr. Heyer. It's
Right, so a lot of these issues came up at
something
the.
that, something that is important to do that we're not able to get around to because we are talking about other issues on projects like this.
So a lot of these issues, we've certainly heard them, but in terms of some of these details came up last minute. So we were kind of scrambling yesterday, today, to try to address those issues. Depending upon Paul's technical abilities, we may be able to bring something up on the screen. I also have handouts. If it comes to that, we can do it the old-fashioned way. It's not necessarily in final form, but it is something that we were kind of bouncing around, showing some, I think, minor changes, but they have, a rather significant visual impact. And those are the items that I were talking about before, which are changing some of the brick accents on some of the units, changing the height of the parapet wall on some of the other units.
You know what I love about this? It's like if you ask, a new PowerPoint comes.
That's
So
right.
you're asking all the right questions, and now you're going to show something new.
Well, I mean, the process is moving pretty quickly, and I understand there's a dynamism to it. The staff suggests something this afternoon, and the applicant.
Right, and
has got a-
we had kind of bounced it around with staff. It hasn't been necessarily fully vetted.
Yeah, right.
But
But,
hopefully we can bring it up. I can,
While that's
I don't know
coming
how close
up,
you are. I can,
yeah, while that's coming up, if I could, to some of the comments you made, Commissioner, I think they're spot on, right? The purpose behind the T-zones was certainly to advertise that the city council wants to see more housing development within the city. It was specifically selected as a by right development option. There was obviously a lot of discussion about that, and staff is very respectful of that. We understand that by right means that there's a lot of flexibility provided for the property owner so long as they stay within the limits of the ordinance. And as I said in my preamble, that's what they've done here. So no, I don't think the architectural changes are intended to be anything sort of more significant than what the applicants got up on the screen now. And really, these are sort of refinements. They don't change the building footprints. They don't change the overall architectural style. I don't think they would impede them from moving forward to building permit.
and this is a rendering that was put together. I just want to caveat that this is not the final form. For example, there's no street trees shown here. There will still be street trees. They simply did not make the final rendering. I'm going to have Jason Bryan kind of talk through the changes here and the rationale behind them.
So this is what we were talking about earlier. Those gray units, a belt course change to more of a buff brick that's more in the color family of that infill panel on the bay, kind of tying that unit together as its own thing. And then for the two pink units without bays, we were lowering that parapet level down and then putting a rail on top, so we maintained at that 42. So then in terms of any other like fine tuning and adjustment, if it comes to situations like increasing fenestration, like on the oak part, do those single windows become double windows, things like that? Those are fairly easy refinements and adjustments for us to make at this point. I think those are things that we're comfortable with, and certainly these changes that we're proposing, we think, good news is the process is working. Like, the design's challenged, we're moving forward. This thing is, instead of a proposal that was one direction and we went 180, we've been kind of tumbling this snowball, and we're losing the stuff that we don't need and we're gaining some other stuff. We're pretty confident and satisfied with the way the process has been going up to this point, pretty much across the board.
So since everybody else has expressed their personal opinion, in my personal opinion, this is good. You still haven't solved the question of how to take a bath in front of a double hung picture window, but, good luck with that. If you can figure that out, come to my house. But otherwise, it has a contemporary look to me, and yet not a institutional feel or a mega development feel to it that some of the mixed-use buildings, frankly do have, because they're big buildings, they're just massive. And, I appreciate this, if this gives any, comfort or response to some of the things we've heard before. I think this ought to be taken into consideration as we decide tonight whether we can vote to move forward with the expectation that what the final submission will be within, hopefully days, not weeks, will be in this family. So that we can get on with, other applications of this nature, which we'll learn from what we've learned in this process, and so we can turn to focusing on discussing affordable housing in a serious way. Time is money, right? Hard experience told us that with railroad cottages, when we first saw them on the board, they were going to sell for $700,000. And that was middle housing, missing. It was first new housing built in the city under, $1 million or so in years. And yet, it took a long time to get through the approval process, and by the time they went up for sale, they're closer to $900,000. They may be up to $1 million now. Everything sells for $1 million now. My in-laws' house, which is 60 years old, just sold for $1 million. It's nothing extraordinary, but it is, for better or worse, middle housing. A couple with $170,000 income is able to reach that. And I'm hopeful that we can approve this on a track that will enable us to keep that price tag down below $1 million so that it is accessible to, two people who have good Washington-type jobs and kind of swing a $170,000 income into a modern, well-equipped building and save money on not having to own that second car. So that they can afford to live right in downtown Falls Church and walk everywhere they need to walk, where they need to go. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. And just want to thank you to my fellow commissioners for the great comments and the thoughts and perspectives on all this. This is, I think, generally what we thought we were going to get from the T-zones. As I expressed at the work session, I was surprised at the price point of these units. It shows what I know about the market, I think, myself. But it does bring more housing, does activate this area. So I'm fine with it for what it is. I think what's in front of us now are these issues about how much we leave to the discretion of the process and what we want to dictate up here. If I felt strongly about either one of the issues around the architecture or the lighting, I think we should articulate that. I just don't have that strong. I very much appreciate Ms. Freelander's comments and the thoughts, got me thinking about it, but I don't feel that strongly enough myself to dictate that up here. And the lighting, you could explain to me the lumens and everything else. I wouldn't really have a good perspective on that either. So I'm comfortable with staff directing a lot of that. I think that's consistent with what we've done before, but I want to make sure the other commissioners are as well. So what's in front of us now are these two motions for the site plan application and for the subdivision application. Unless there are any other questions or comments or thoughts from the commissioners, we would entertain a motion on both of these.
Do they need to be done separately, the motions?
I think separate motions and separate votes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can do the subdivision application motion. Whereas the Planning Commission finds that the approval of the subdivision application meets all applicable requirements of Chapter 38, subdivision regulations, and whereas the proposed subdivision application is to consolidate the existing 2 parcels and re-subdivide into 12 lots. Lots 1 and 6 are 1,099 square feet. Lots 2 to 5 are 816 square feet. Lots 7 and 12 are 1,008 square feet, and lots 8 to 11 are 748 square feet in size, and 1 parcel of 5,115 square feet in size. And now therefore I move that the Planning Commission approve subdivision application Munis Pound 2024-0089 to create the above-mentioned 12 lots and 1 parcel.
Thank you very much. It's been moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Duncan. Any discussion on the motion? Okay. Do your roll call vote, Mr. Trainer?
Yep, Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Ms. Friedlander,
Yes.
Mr. Krasner,
Yes.
Ms. Comont,
Yes.
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Hyra,
No.
Mr. Puentes.
Yes.
The motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next motion on the subdivision application.
Site plan.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we just approved the subdivision.
Yep, backwards. Yep, site plan application.
I can read that one too. Whereas the Planning Commission finds that the approval of the site plan meets all applicable requirements of Division 7 site plans, including Section 48-1141 of the zoning ordinance, and whereas the proposed site plan is for development of 12 townhomes with a net floor area between 1,153 and 1,464 square feet. Now, therefore, I move that the Planning Commission approve site plan application Pound 2024-0089 to permit the construction of the proposed 12 townhomes, contingent upon the applicant resubmitting an updated final site plan and subdivision plat to be reviewed administratively and approved by the planning director that address the following. 1, minor technical comments as noted in the attached staff comment table to satisfy code and policy requirements. 2, revised layout reflecting the revised sidewalk design submitted on April 24th, 2024 to match the city's adopted streetscape standards. And 3, refined architectural elevations that better define the windows and doors through changes in color or materials to align with the city's design guidelines.
Thank you. It's been moved. We have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Duncan. Discussion on the motion?
I have discussion.
Please.
Yeah, and I'd make a friendly amendment on that. And I think, first of all, well, before I make that amendment, I mean, I'm glad Mr. Duncan has joined us because, he brings a very level-headed approach to some of this stuff, and so I appreciate his perspective, which is helpful. And also I appreciate, that things evolve, and, there's staff is continually working to make it a better end result. Obviously, keeping us in the loop on that is always advisable. So if there are other ideas or proposals that are floating around, ideally they'd be in the package. If they can't, maybe there's a way to alert us to that. But I'm glad we had them eventually, and I do think that is an improvement over what was in the original renderings. And so I would propose a friendly amendment that instead of the more vague part of that motion that sort of leaves it up to kind of an amorphous future discussion amongst both sides, if the commissioners are amenable to the new revised concept, that we propose that it be consistent with that, as was displayed during the public hearing tonight, that we make it, that be a condition of the site plan approval, that the ultimate design is consistent with that rendering that was displayed at the end of the hearing. So that'd be my friendly amendment, instead of number 3, the way it's worded now.
Would that go in item 3?
Yeah, well, we would replace 3 with, or refined architectural elevations consistent with I don't know if there's a title to that drawing, or a date on it, but whatever that is.
Consistent with the renderings.
The revised renderings
The revised
that were provided
renderings.
at the public hearing.
Sure.
My question, does that still allow staff the flexibility to kind of keep
Iterating.
massaging that. and-
I would
because
read it that way. I think consistent with is, we like this direction that you're going in. Is that what you're?
Well, we can say generally consistent. I mean, I'm not trying to box them into that precise dimension of a window, but I mean, I think what we're trying to say is
Yeah.
that we like the colors, the fenestration, that was an improvement over the initial.
And that would still give us some kind of control.
And I think that's what staff was getting at, and staff, they could chime in if they'd like, but I think that's what they were getting at with number 3, and if that's true, then I think we should, because again, I think for our purposes, and also for the public who's maybe watching this, they want to know that what they see is what they're going to get when we vote. I mean, yes, things happen afterwards, there's some tweaking, adjustments, but for something like design like that, I think that it's always a shame when you put up a picture and then it turns out to be very different, and people wonder, well, what the heck happened between what I saw on TV and what got built? So if we like that drawing, I think we should say it should be consistent with that.
I think generally consistent is good, because I think design is kind of there's dynamic tension with that keeps developing, right?
Yeah, generally
So-
consistent is fine. We can put that qualifier in. Generally consistent with the rendering that was provided and displayed at the
revised rendering.
revised rendering at the hearing.
Yeah, because the new illustration was basically trying to give more individuality to each of the units, and I think that's the concept that we're interested in achieving.
I do have one more question, just for a point of discussion. We did talk about the foot candles and whether
Wait
or
a
not.
second, we have a-
Before you, let's
Sorry.
that's fine. Let's just take this friendly amendment,
Accepted for me.
accepted by the
seconder.
motioner,
Seconder accepts.
accepted by the seconder, and then, more discussion, Ms. Freelander, sorry.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to kind of come back, because this doesn't actually address the more technical component of the lighting foot candle requirement, and to me, that is, because it's more technical, it's not really something that we can dictate from up here, at least from my point of view and my professional point of view, is that, you need to really study of what is industry standard in these types of scenarios, and then kind of move toward that with staff and with the applicant. And so I don't know if number 1 really
think it's-
addresses that.
Yeah, it's included in the table, right? Do you want to call it out specifically? Because
Is it in the
that's,
table? Because I see it on line number 39. I don't see it on the table. Oh, yes, no, you're right. It is on the table. It's addressed. Thank you.
That's a good catch.
No other amendment on my part. Thanks.
Could I ask a question if we're in discussion?
Please.
Repeating what I asked staff, is this a activity that can be completed within days, not weeks?
Yeah, it usually takes a couple weeks anyway for the applicant to do their sort of final submittal. That includes clearing all their bond estimates. Obviously, with any project, there are public improvement bonds that are posted for maintenance of the right-of-way, that the landscaping survives, that erosion and settlement control is all properly handled, and typically those estimates are finalized either just before or just after site plan approval. So my expectation is that all of this would happen at the same time as those things. But I don't know if the applicant wants to speak to their expected timeframe for resubmittals.
I think it's consistent with what's shown in there. It's our intent to submit kind of, I guess it's called the post-approval submission by the 15th of May, 2 weeks from more or less today.
Okay. That, given the staff workload, digestible?
Oh, yeah, we've got that built in. So for a later discussion, but one of the things we are trying to carve out, obviously, with this budget and our staffing plans is that we can carry out business as usual at the same time as working on the council's change agenda. So, yes, I think that's the kind of workflow we'd expect with this application.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded, and the friendly amendment's been approved. So can we have a roll call vote, Mr. Trainer, please?
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Ms. Friedlander,
Yes.
Mr. Grasner,
Yes.
Ms. Comont,
yes.
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Hyra,
No.
Mr. Puentes.
Yes?
Thank you. Motion passes 6-1.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks to the applicant, thanks to staff. It's a good discussion. We're going to have lots more of those, and as we go forward with these T-zone proposals. So, okay, last action item we have are the Planning Commission minutes from the 17th of April, 2024. Any comments on the minutes from that meeting? Comments on the minutes?
I had one change.
Mr. Stevens?
It's on line 53. I don't know if you can pull that up. There you go. Talks about disclosure would be required at a time of sale if the property is within the floodplain, but we're talking about actual structures there. So I would add, but not the structure. So if the property, but not the structure, is within the floodplain.
Okay. Get it?
Is that acceptable language?
Mr. Stevens, second?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else?
I move we
I think we
approve.
have one over here first.
Oh,
Mr. Stevens, I want,
you
does
had another one.
that cover what you're doing?
Yeah, just see if there's a better place for it, but versus what he had. But I think that works. Yeah, that's okay.
Good? Okay, Ms. Freelander?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a real quick item, I think it's a typo on line 84. I think it should be the May 1st meeting, not the May 3rd. And that was all I had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
People are reading these minutes very closely. That's good. That's good. All right, anything else on the minutes? Your motion?
Yeah, I move we approve the minutes for the Planning Commission meeting of April 17th, 2024, as amended.
As amended.
Second?
Second, by Mr. Stevens, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
maybe I'll oppose.
There's no affordable housing in it.
You weren't there.
You're allowed to abstain.
I kid you, but
I approve it.
Yeah.
All right, let's move into our work session.
Mr. Chair, if I may, it's been 2 hours. I don't know if you want to
It has?
take a
God,
short.
Feels like just minutes, but do you want to take a break? Yes. Okay, take a 5-minute break?
Nice in the kicker.
Good. The last one.
Sorry, Tim.
At our last meeting, and we've continued it to our next meeting we'll have the public hearing on the map at our next meeting, but we're going to do a work session now tonight to cover up any remaining issues. So, Mr. Stoddard, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the commission. I'm happy to introduce this item briefly, and as you said, sort of connect the thread to where you were at your last meeting. So last time you saw this was at a public hearing during your meeting on April 17th. At that time, you were being asked by council to consider both the map amendment and the text amendment. The time period allotted to the commission to provide comment on the text amendment has passed. So council held their public hearing on the text amendment 2 days ago on the 29th. They did decide at that meeting to continue that item specifically on the text to next week, so they'll make their final decision on that on the 6th. That's not what's before you for discussion tonight. Instead, also on the 29th, the council specifically referred the map to you. They had heard many of the same comments you had heard at your meeting, concerns about sort of noticing. Did people know what was coming? Did they have a chance to ask questions? And so to make sure that was done right, they did ask that that be re-referred out to the commission. So that's the item before you is the map. And just if I could on the noticing, obviously none of this was ever intended to catch anyone by surprise, right? This is in its spirit a good thing. It's the National Flood Insurance Program that protects people from the loss of their homes, which is people's principal investment. And I think it is, I don't want to steal their thunder, but I think it is in the presentation tonight. There's a slide with a lot of fine text because that's what they had to do to fit it on the slide, but it walks through the noticing that was done over the last several years about the map amendment, and then also the ramping up just over the last couple weeks, really responding to those comments that were coming in most recently around additional sign postings, additional letters that were mailed, and I also know there were additional phone calls and meetings held between staff and the property owners. So with, I will say procedurally, so as I was sort of saying at the beginning, this is the map is specifically what's before you. It's here for work session tonight. Council has directed that you provide your recommendation no later than May 17th, which happens 2 days after your next meeting. So we have scheduled and advertised a public hearing for you on this map amendment at your next regular meeting on May 15th. So with that, I'll turn it over to the lead staffer on this one, Jeff Rubin.
Thank you, Mr. Stoddard, and hello, Commissioners. Apologies for the last session. I know audio issues were one component that probably made just communication in general a little more difficult. I could hear you guys just fine. I understand that was not exactly the same mutually. So tonight we are discussing a zoning map amendment. And just for an abundance of clarity, this is a zoning map amendment. The floodplain map is connected to the text amendment. So the text amendment is acknowledging FEMA's floodplain map. This is looking at an overlay. This is looking at an overlay and just confirming or affirming that that is absorbed in our zoning map, if that makes sense. So we're not really arguing, we're not discussing or getting into the weeds about the floodplain specifically. It's just how that is reflected in our zoning map. Is this, do you mind just driving? Thank you. So tonight we're going to go back over the National Floodplain Insurance Program, look at the firm. You guys have the attachment as well of the firm. It's the very large 3 pages. We've kind of looked at it before. Look at an overlay that I think you guys have seen before, but I just wanted to show you again. Look at the misidentification of addresses. I just wanted a chance to explain where those issues came about, then give you a timeline of events, and then finally look at address the question that kind of came up over and over about structures versus parcels being in the floodplain. And I apologize for reading this verbatim. I just think this is kind of the easiest way to get into this. The NFIP is managed by FEMA and provides flood insurance to property owners, renters, and businesses. Having this coverage helps them recover faster when floodwaters recede. The NFIP works with communities required to adopt and enforce floodplain management regulations that help mitigate flooding effects. Flood insurance is available to anyone in one of the almost 23,000 participating NFIP communities. Homes and businesses in high-risk flood areas with mortgages from government-backed lenders are required to have flood insurance. FEMA publishes a document for participating communities which reflects high-risk flood areas. This document is known as the Flood Insurance Rate Map, or the FIRM. And the next slide, again, is quite unhelpful, generally speaking, from this scale. But as you can kind of trace where the trips run is at the very least, and if you squint, you can see 4 Mile Run on the right. But again, you have that in its full size in electronic form as well. Going to the next, a much more helpful representation of our parcel map with the floodplain map. This is showing, and you can see the colors. There's the legend is the same for both maps. The green, which is most easily seen on the 4 Mile Run, it's I think exclusive to all of those. Those are moving into the floodplain. The bright pink are parcels moving out of the floodplain. And then you can get into where the floodways are for 2020 or 2004. So that's the current map, and 2024, which is the soon to be adopted map, and also the 1% annual chance flood area, or what we just call the floodplain, generally speaking, both of those inclusive. There were 13 coming out, 13 parcels coming out, 14 parcels going in. So we are going from 194 to 195 private parcels. There are some City of Falls Church parcels, park parcels, things like that. I'm not including in that because that doesn't seem terribly relevant. But that is what affects the community, generally speaking. And that's, I think, it's just a good comparison. Makes a lot more sense. As to the noticing error, let's go to the next slide. As to the noticing error that we incurred the last round, and the reason we're kind of restarting this process. On the left, you'll see the label on top saying 6936 North 26th Street, but you'll notice the highlighted ones say the address number N space TH space ST. There was no 26th. I probably either fat-fingered or just pressed 3 and, just an error in its straight typo in that way. I've spoken with the assessor. That has been corrected in there in the assessment system, and obviously in our noticing it's been corrected. On the right for 408 Van Buren Street, you'll see a dotted line, and maybe, Jack, can you put the cursor over that? I don't know if you can... Do you see what I'm talking about? Oh, yeah. All right, so where 613 East Columbia Street is, that used to be an L, and the age of this data is showing because this was changed in 2020. So the dotted line was where the property line was moved, and that rear parcel became part of 408 North Van Buren. That was not fully integrated into the assessor's website when this query was ran, so we identified 613 instead of 408. And so that, again, has been corrected with the assessor and in our noticing as well. Was that a raised hand or just a stretch? Sure.
Is now an appropriate time to ask questions? I mean, you guys had a work session when I wasn't here, right? This is the second, this is part 2, so probably my question was already...
We can wait till the end, or...
Yeah, I mean, it's up, that's fine. I don't know what do you want me to do? I can wait till the end,
I would
but
ask if we could wait till the end.
Sure.
I think we've got a summary at the end that kind of...
that might answer this.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
All right. So yeah, I just wanted to explain that if fully, just to make sure that we were that everyone was on the same page with that. The next slide is the aforementioned kind of small print, but you'll notice that this process started back in April of 2020. Things to call out specifically, August 27th, 2022. The public was invited to review flood maps in the City of Falls Church, which was published in Falls Church News Press. Then again in November of 2022. I took a while to get this answer from FEMA, but essentially things take a while. So we got the letter of final determination in December of 2023. That's the amount of detail that I received after many questions. And then that kicked off a 6-month timeline for us to do this adoption that you're all very aware of, which is why you see March, April, and nauseam. But that includes the letters, the courtesy letters on March 26th, with the asterisk being we misidentified those two properties. letters sent to all properties within 150 feet of the properties that are moving in or out. We refer to those as APON. Let me know if I get this incorrect, but adjacent property owner notification. Jack, is that correct? Okay. So we sent that out, and I think that was above the required notification. Usually that's for a 25 or fewer zoning change. We have 27 parcels changing. We were just going above and beyond to ensure that we reached out and made as much outreach in the timeline that we had. Yard signs, as you are aware, and then we restarted this process kind of back at the top, near the middle top right. And yesterday, yard signs were deployed by myself and Mr. Trainer. I think it took about 5 hours to deploy all 27, and I appreciate the help. And then we're here today to do the work session. And as Mr. Stoddard mentioned, I spoke with, I think, everybody that spoke at the Planning Commission session, at the session that I wasn't present for, but I was, virtually attending. I think I spoke with all of them, or at least everyone I had spoken to prior on the phone, and many residents in addition to that on the phone, a couple in person, and many others through email as well. And then finally, addressing the structures versus parcels question. So the bottom is the address that the top is going to take us to. And Mr. Trainer, if you would not mind. This is a site run by DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation, VFRIS, Virginia Floodplain Risk in, I forget exactly what it stands for. I've known it as VFRIS for years. And this is a great site to, this shows more accurately, are we having trouble bringing it up? It's sharing on Teams but not here. I promise we did test this. I did give him a heads up.
Can you describe what it is?
Yeah, it's the state-run site. It has the current. It basically, if you go to that address, it'll say, "Are you in the flood?" or "What is your flood risk?" You put in your address, and then it'll bring up a map and say, "You are in the 1%. You're not in. You're in the floodway. What have you?" And then at the bottom, kind of at the bottom of the box that pops up, it just say get more information. Clicking on that will open up just there it is. And can we go to 601 South Oak? Oh, perfect. Knew we'd done this before. Or not. South Oak.
We'll blame it on the state.
These government sites.
Yeah, so, and that'll it's showing us Richmond, awesome. Oh, it went to Enrique.
It'll fill in. There you go. If you click below that one, Jack, that one. Oh, you're trying.
Yeah, it's not populating with.
All right, we get I think we understand.
So, but it
Tells you
it's.
if you're in the floodplain. So we know.
One more time. Okay. I'll make sure this is going to be on the city website within the next 24 hours, and. Yeah, we'll move on. But I think it's a much better source for people, individuals, city residents, whatnot, that want to understand their flood risk. It has the current, meaning the 2004 minted floodplain maps on it, and it also has a box to tick for preliminary maps, and in there it'll show you the 2024, and it will be updated, I believe they said within about 2 weeks or so of the effective date, which is June 6th, 2024. I think Mr. Bradley had a thing or two he wanted to say, and then we'll be ready for questions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Rubin. And I apologize to the commission. Some of this may be repetitive, but I think it kind of sums up what we've done and kind of how we've got here over the last month and a half. So as both Mr. Rubin and Mr. Stoddard has said, over the last couple of months, we've tried to condense two things into a concurrent process. One of them is the text ordinance and the floodplain map, and the other is what is here before the commission tonight, being the zoning map. Unfortunately, we mislabeled a couple of properties. So the text amendment and the firm have moved forward. They're with council. They have deferred approval until Monday night next week, which is May 6th, if I did my dates correctly. We're going to have at least two versions of that text amendment in front of them, one being a bare bones, one including all 5 of those recommended higher standards. There are some ongoing conversations of do we want to have 2 or 3 of the higher standards as a third option. We're still working through those details. That was critical to keep on track. Mislabeling the notifications did only affect the zoning map. So we were able to keep that on track. Just for a refresher, we have to have that adopted into FEMA 30 days prior to June 6th, which is our drop dead date. If we were to miss that date, we would fall out of the NFIP and all sorts of bad things would happen in the city. I'll spare the commission from the details unless questions come up. So with that, we've had to kind of reset on the floodplain map. Or sorry, thank you, the zoning map. Rather than try and go back and do the handful of parcels just by themselves, we felt it was best to just redo the whole thing all at once just for clarity's sake. We didn't want to approve, and I'm going to make numbers up, but we didn't want to approve 9,997 parcels and then do 3 a month later. It didn't make sense. It was confusing. The zoning map is also something that FEMA is not interested in, so we had the flexibility to use the month of May to bring it back to you and kind of reset ourselves. So all that being said, the track we're on with the zoning map, plus the track council's on with the text ordinance and the firm, everything is set to kind of converge on, I believe, May 28th, if I remember my dates correctly. And it all kind of becomes effective on June 6th, which is that drop dead date. So we're happy to take questions about the ordinance, about the firm. And I don't mean, if we respond in a manner that is, it's with council or like that's kind of set, that's not to be callous, that's not to be cold, that's not to dismiss the commission, that's just kind of where we're at. But we're happy to respond to any questions you may have over both tracks and see where we can get tonight. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Brady. Thank you, Mr. Rubin. Anything else, sir?
That's it. We'll just welcome your questions.
Yep. Appreciate you coming back for us, and thanks for all the clarity and the timeline and for working through all this. I know we received some comments from residents in our written correspondence. It was mostly about the text amendments, I think, too. But I'm sure the commissioners had a chance to read that. So we'll just open it up, see if anybody has any questions. I know, Mr. Hira, you had something?
I just had one in terms of, I don't know, maybe you covered this last week, but do property owners understand? You had some properties, moving out and others moving in, and there's not that many that are changing their status, but have you communicated with them, and do they fully understand what moving in or out means? And I just say that, was it 410 South Maple? Like, I know that property pretty well now. That's Pearson Square.
Yes, it is.
That's a huge building. From them moving in, that could change the rent structure there. I mean, they're going to have to get insurance now. Like, I don't think anyone in that building understands the repercussions of the moving statuses. And I'm curious if you've had discussions with the management company, and do they have a plan in place about maybe rent hikes, because now they've got to get flood insurance. And that's a lot of our residents in one building. And some of the other properties, they're smaller, but the same thing's going to happen for somebody who was out and now is in, and then their mortgage company is going to be calling them, and do they know that? And do they know that they're going to have to get a different insurance structure? So again, all these things related to this, I know there's nothing really, anything that can be done. I mean, this is the federal government, but at the same time, we can educate the people that might not be clear on what this change really means.
Right. So specifically to 410 South Maple, did I get that right, or did I just have a brain? Okay. The last slide that I provided was the parcels versus structures, and that's kind of a big distinction. We don't quite have the staff time to and resources generally to specifically identify every structure that is in the floodplain and every structure that is not. So we notify and over-notify on a parcel basis. That Pearson Square the structure is not in the floodplain. It does not touch the floodplain. The floodplain touches the parcel boundary only, similar to Gresham Place, similar to a lot of other structures. So
What does that mean in terms of triggering?
Nothing. This is just an over-notification because we don't have the resources to specifically notify on the structure level. It is just for those.
Do you understand? Does everyone understand my question?
Yeah, so the only requirement for flood insurance is if the building is in the floodplain. If the building is out of the floodplain but the parcel is in it, there is no additional insurance requirement. It's just if the structure resides, and it's specifically like if you have a garage, a detached garage that's in the floodplain, that falls into a different category. That gets a bit more nuanced.
They don't insure
Right.
additional property. Yeah.
Correct, but a dwelling unit at Pearson Square, those would have to be in the floodplain to require a floodplain a flood insurance policy to be mandated. So, by and large, most of these changes are parcels only. As Mr. Rubin has said, it could be a structure here or there, but very, very small.
Again, I'm not an expert in any of this whatsoever, but I do know that the structure of Pearson Square is almost the footprint of the parcel. So that's odd. And the flooding will go right into the parking structure. So it's just, I assume that with the change, they will have a change in their insurance. Even if you're telling me that, the parcel is in the flood zone, but the structure is not, they're almost one and the same on that particular site. So it would seem odd. If I was insuring that building and I had the construction loan or a loan, there's no way that I wouldn't, with this change, make them do something different.
Did you have something you wanted to say?
So as certified floodplain managers for the city, both Jeff and I tell everybody, right, whether you're in the floodplain or not, you should get floodplain insurance, right? If it can rain, it can flood. Even the parcels that are dropping out of the floodplain, right, just because they're out of the floodplain doesn't mean their risk of a flood for any given event has gone down, right? The topography is the same, rain events are rain events. Totally agree with where you're coming from, but from a legal standpoint, nobody can require Pearson Square to get flood insurance. Should they? Yes, they probably should, right? If they were to call Jeff or myself, we would very much encourage them to get it, but no mortgage lender can require it of them. I'll leave it at that, but I don't disagree with you.
Where I live, Gresham Place, the entire common area was brought in to the floodplain, but we don't insure the land, so there's no impact.
There's nothing to insure in the eyes of the NFIP.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other comments?
Is there a question?
Yep, question from Mr. Pressler.
Yeah, just a question. I appreciate, that, again, this was, it's kind of, you're on a tight time frame, and we didn't mean to throw a monkey wrench in the whole thing, but, we have, when we see problems, we have to call them out. And so, on the, so the text, we never made a recommendation on the text update. It went to council, because it can. without any recommendation from us. When they vote on that, Paul, I made this question for Mr. Stoddard. What does that mean now when they have because the ordinance says that, you know, any zoning ordinance amendment needs to go to the planning commission. The planning commission needs to make a recommendation. It goes back to council. Obviously, you know, the council can, I don't believe if we make no recommendation, which is what we did here, I think they can still approve it, but do they need like a super majority or something in order to approve it, or they?
Yeah. So the procedures for that are set out in the state and city code. So you're right that any zoning ordinance amendment has to be referred to the planning commission, and then by default, the planning commission has 100 days to respond, or it can be a shorter time frame as set in the council resolution, and they did set a shorter time frame. So if you guys review within that window in the affirmative, then a simple majority by council carries the day. If the same situation occurs if you guys don't respond before that time period closes. So since the time period has closed, a simple majority by council still enough to vote through the change. Where your authority comes in is that if you provide a negative recommendation within that window, then they need 5 affirmative votes.
Or if the window was still open, for example. Right? I don't recall them last meeting talking about that. How much time did they give us? I don't remember what that was.
Do you mean for the text amendment or
Yeah.
for the map amendment?
For the text amendment.
No, for the text amendment, we it was in the resolution, which was in your packet, but we hadn't specifically called it out in the staff report, but it was just a couple days after your scheduled public hearing. And one of the things we are going to do as planning staff is do a better job of highlighting that in the staff report.
'cause
So
that
right
wasn't
up
in there.
front,
Yeah.
on line 8 here, we have flagged that the respond by date set by council for this is May 17th.
Right, and that 100-day rule comes from state code, you know, that 100-day rule for, yeah.
Correct. Yeah, it's specific in state code that it says 100 days or shorter time as may be set by council.
Right, and that's local here. Because there are other things as far as how they interpret, like when the 100-day clock starts ticking sometimes. But I guess here, because it goes to council first, it's different. But, all right, so that's out of our hands now. We didn't do anything, and they took it back anyway, which is fine. So, right, we could talk about the text, but we probably shouldn't waste our time, because there's not much we can do now other than just talk about it. But did I say, I guess, although am I correct in what I saw in the council documents that there are certain things they're just going to adopt kind of the model ordinance now because they got to get something up there. But then there were other changes potentially that they may look at separately. Is that correct? I don't know who would answer that question, but wasn't there something like that?
That's the higher regulatory standards.
Yeah,
Right.
there are a set of higher regulatory standards. There are still they're going to be, we are going to provide City Council with the bare minimum requirements set by FEMA and whatnot, that as modified to fit the City of Falls Church. Then we're going to provide them also ones with a variation of higher regulatory standards as well. And that's what they've asked for next week.
I see. I'm sorry. I missed that part of the discussion.
Not a
Or
problem.
I missed I was not following it close. All right. So, but still, right. So it's not coming back to us in any form in any way. So so that's sort of up to council to decide what they're going to do.
Just the map.
Yeah. So just the map. And I guess, yeah, the map is the map. I don't think we ever had any qualms with the map. You know, as far as that goes, it you know, as long as the notice is up, is good, and it sounds like you guys have addressed that, and that was an unusual situation, and I believe it was actually like within a family, like, you know, the people who own those 2 properties on Van Buren are related, and I think they did that swap so they could, although, without getting into too many details of what they did, I mean, it does highlight the importance of some of the stuff councils, I'll just say on the record, they built a large structure back there in that piece of land that, you know, might, under new rules, have been maybe restricted. So anyhow, it's still important, even, and that's why the notice, even for a parcel like that, is important. But anyhow, but otherwise, I think the map is good. I think the notice is good. So I don't think I have any more questions.
Thank you. Ms. Freelander?
My question's been answered. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? I agree. I think that, you know, what's in front of us is all pretty straightforward. I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, the city attorney is also with us virtually. If folks had questions for her. Thank you for joining. And seeing none, I think then we will go ahead and close out this work session, and then we will see you all at our next meeting on the 17th,
15th.
15th. Right. Thanks very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to skip 7B for now. I think we're still on track to have that in a discussion. So let's move on to 8, information items, planning commissioner reports. Any planning commissioner reports?
I attended another meeting of the Affordable Living Policy Work Group in Mr. Harris' stead. We miss you. You're welcome. Lots of discussion about the approach, some kind of kind of detailed discussion about different aspects of the policy that we might want to update, recommendations that we would be making. So still kind of a work in process. I think we have a work in progress. We have another 4 to 5 meetings, I believe. So I'll keep reporting as we get closer.
Great.
But it's still happening.
Forward to that.
I can likely make the next 2. I don't know if you want to go, which would be great, but if you don't.
I can go on the 8th.
Yeah.
The 22nd, I have my kids' spring band concert, so that might be.
Do you mind if we overlap on the 8th? We'll both go.
Oh, yeah,
And
no,
then
that'd be great.
I'll make the 22nd.
Okay, cool.
Thank you both for that. Other commissioner reports? All right. Moving on, director's report. Mr. Stoddard.
I'll be brief, if I could. Mr. Turner, could you pull up the agenda, since I never want to surprise anybody with an agenda item? Let's see. Second page should include the look ahead. So your next regular meeting will be May 15th. Floodplain map will come back for public hearing and action. Also up for public hearing and action will be a recommendation to City Council on the Tinner Hill Historic District, which you all had previously seen as a work session item. And then you also have a joint work session with the Housing Commission to review the latest draft of the demographics chapter. So that's now gone the rounds with public engagement, reviews by other boards and commissions. And so where this started, a joint session with the Housing Commission looking at the demographic study from Stephen Fuller Institute, we wanted to use that same setting, a joint session with the Housing Commission to look at this draft comprehensive plan chapter. Council, you can see their chart on the right. They'll be tracking various items that you have also been tracking. I am excited to announce, I think we're going to get moving on the commercial parking relief for existing commercial uses that was talked about at the mayor's meeting this morning, and I think there's a green light to move forward with that, really on that sort of economic development, but also environmental sustainability. What can you do with older buildings so that you don't have to tear everything down? And then you can see on your column on the left, a lot of the items we're already talking about, demographics chapter coming back for final action. You've also got a new item, the parklet. This was flagged as part of the city's stormwater code. It looks like in the city's code, there's a requirement to do a water quality assessment. I don't think you've seen one of those in a while. I don't remember seeing one, so we'll make sure that that's clear when that comes to you for action. And there you go, and then the rest of the items are things already discussed. We are looking at opportunities for speaker series coming up, since we do have some lighter agendas in late June and July. So if there are any topics that the commission's particularly interested in, I know one that's been on my mind, COG adopted regional tree canopy goals. Wanted to see if we could get someone from that task force, talk to the group about that regional goal and what it means for the city.
Great.
Yeah, Ed Salzberg had recommended to me someone who would speak on the subject of land value tax. I'm sure you're familiar with that. We look at your tax as being encompassed only in the land and not separately in the structure. And some jurisdictions have gone after that. Anyway, Ed has someone that he's familiar with who's very knowledgeable in that area. So I'm happy to share the details with you if there's interest in that topic.
Spoken like an economist.
Yeah.
Right.
Actually,
follow
this
up.
person is an economist, so.
And then I saw another hand raised on ideas.
Yeah, I just had one. I thought with the speaker series, we were going to try to get somebody to talk about land banking. We had talked about that, I thought, at the end of last year. and we're in May, we haven't gotten anyone yet. But it'd be great to hear someone talk about how we can potentially land bank.
All right, I got them both down. We'll see what we can find. And then just to set up the conversation, in the director's report, I think we just had one item, which was our quarterly report for the planning division and the zoning division, separate divisions operating independently. I'm not going to go through the whole document. It's 20-something pages of the very detailed milestones we use to track each of our projects. I like it from a project management standpoint. It's not very interesting to the public, though, but I do want to be transparent about what we're doing with the public's money. If you go to page 2, this is the new graphic I wanted to share, and I thought it might be helpful as you go into your last work session item of the night. But we did want to be obviously responsive, right? Council setting the tone here, laying out their 5 strategic priorities. And so we copied the front page of their document. And then what we did is we went through our report and looked for the items that are relevant to those things, relevant to environment, housing, economic development, transportation, and governance. We didn't get title blocks in there, but we did at least color code them. We gave each project a name, and then we showed the progress we're making current quarter versus last quarter. So I wanted to introduce that. And then in your package this is really setting up your next work session. What you've got is a couple different things. You've got the referral from council asking you to talk about their strategic priorities and how those obviously intersect with your work. You've got the council strategic priorities document. You've got this one-page printout that's up on the screen now. And then the other item you've got is the priorities that you had talked about wanting to work on that you had adopted into your annual report. So what I might do is just actually transition directly into that item and say that you all were asked by council to hold a work session and respond back to them, I think this month. You all are already scheduled to give your annual report to council. Mr. Chair, you've confirmed that you're available to do that. And so as you all are holding your work session, I think grounding it in the priorities that you already discussed and agreed on, and then thinking about any revisions you might want to make as part of the voice track in that presentation. I think that would be maybe a useful way to use your time tonight. On the line is your council liaison, Councilmember Underhill. The council was looking for the council liaisons to be involved in that discussion. She's available to join us by Teams. She's, hi, Councilmember. She's not a member of the committee, so I don't think you actually have to go into a remote participation requirement. It's, right, this would be just like any other member of the public that you invited to be part of the conversation. So I don't think you have to go into your remote participation rules, but she is available to join the conversation.
Okay.
Are there any questions about the report? Otherwise, I'll get out of the way.
Questions on the director's report? All right. Seeing none.
All right, thank you.
So how should we proceed with the work session then? So-
Well, it's a little free-flowing, so I think I would leave it to you guys. Because again, you've already got priorities that you wanted to recommend, and those were very much grounded in the most recently adopted council work plan. I think the message from the recent council strategic priorities, and Councilmember, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think a lot of that is let's keep going with the good stuff and make sure we get it done. And if there's anything we've missed in the past, let's think about how we want to get that done too. So I might put you on the spot a little bit. Councilmember, if there are specific things you think council's looking for, whether it's specific projects or I'm not quite sure what would be most helpful.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Sorry, I'm not there in person. I stayed up till past 12:30 on Monday night for the council meeting, so I'm trying to get back on a good sleep schedule. For the council priorities, we set these in, we picked them in January and February, and then formalized them in March. These are super high-level priorities. What we're planning to do in June is come back and actually put bullet points or specific items underneath those, informed by staff, informed by the public, informed by boards and commissions. What would be helpful is, I guess, going through these, if there's anything glaringly missing, that would be useful. If there are specific projects that you think should go underneath these topics, but mostly getting feedback on whether these general categories cover most everything that you would like to see done in the next 2 years, and hearing feedback on specific items that might go underneath those general priorities.
I'd suggest we see if folks have thoughts, comments on the 5 key priority areas, just as a whole, and then let's walk through all 5 and see if folks have specifics for the council member. So let's start kind of big and broad. How do the 5 big topics look? Mr. Stevens looks like he's ready to.
No, I followed the discussions in council, and I thought they selected the topics that are of current concern, many people in the city. So,
Agreed. Yeah. Mr. Ira?
We have housing. I thought it was affordable housing, but we could just call it housing. But I don't know, we have Oak Park, right? We just reviewed that, but that wasn't affordable, but some might see it as affordable, and then the ADUs are, I think, affordable housing, so I'm just wondering if the bullet for housing we would say affordable housing? But, I think this has already been set, so, but you asked about the 5 priority areas. I'm not adding a new one, I'm just tweaking one that's there.
So at least so there's the category, and then if you actually look at the strategies underneath those, so it's preserve existing affordable housing, expand and build new affordable housing, allow more diverse housing types. So even getting feedback on those specific items, the category is housing, but also strengthen opportunities for people at different life stages, from first-time home buyers to downsizers. And allowing for more diverse housing types is also part of the housing goals. And so even under each of those strategies, we're then going to have specific programs. So getting your feedback on these general strategies as well as the specific things that you want us to get done.
Well, let's just stick on housing then for a second, since it was brought up. So we're going to walk through all of these, but while it's on the table, anything specific that comes out of these strategies that you'd like to see? Are there things that should be taken out, or? Ms. Coleman?
For strategy 3, the allow more diverse housing types, we have sort of accessory dwelling units on the calendar for this year. Is that right? That's already kind of underway. We have that great report from Mr. Trainer that was delivered in January. I see it on the...
We do now have a council kickoff for that. The May 20th work session, we'll be using a revised version. We've obviously gotten good feedback from the commission. We've taken that, folded it into the report, and we'll be sharing that with council.
Okay. So that would be on my list as like a concrete, specific project to allow more diverse housing types. To me, that feels like a good first step.
Anything else?
Should I go through all the strategies?
Or just on the housing?
On housing, yeah. Preserving existing affordable. I feel like there's already a lot of things that are kind of in progress, right? Like there's been a lot of conversations about the fields. Maybe I'd defer to Mr. Hyra about like what sort of concrete actions we could be taking to both preserve existing affordable housing like the fields and expand and build new affordable housing. You have many ideas in that regard.
It's late. Time is short. So I don't think it makes sense to like go over for each of these strategies, all of the different options. But, I think through the, whatever we're calling this, the affordable housing living policy, we'll get to these and we'll do these. I just think maybe at this time, thinking if there are any other strategies like 1, 2, 3, 4, we could add a 5th, a 6th, but like within each category to go over all of the different things that we can possibly do, it's endless. I teach a course that goes for 16 weeks on all of this. So I won't do that tonight. So, but happy, Justine, to pass along to you or whoever options under each of these strategies, because there's a ton that we could do. But also making sure that we're pulling on from like city strategies, but also what's at the state level, what's at the national level. I mean, there's just, within these strategies, there's multiple levels of funding available, but it takes work and, it takes time. But yeah, there are a lot of different things. But I can't really see, I'm just trying to see if there was one strategy that's not here.
How about the unhoused?
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely something.
I mean, there have been discussions as recently as this week about the property yard and
Yep.
and Public Works, conversations with the emergency homeless shelter about including them in their schematics about how that property could, in part at least, be used, which involve a doubling of the size of the emergency homeless shelter, which would be in my view at least, a positive step forward.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Dunn, I think that's great. I was thinking that just looking at our strategies, strengthen opportunities for people at different life stages, from first-time home buyers to downsizers, to homeless people, right? Like, we should add that. I mean, we know we have homelessness.
That's where you put the unhoused,
Yeah.
I think. They come before first-time home buyers.
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be good.
Not to be
No,
flip
absolutely.
about it, but they need a place tonight, as opposed to first-time home buyers who are,
Yeah.
presumably coming up with a strategy to pay for that $1 million townhouse.
Yeah, I would say, just, again, it's late, I don't want to just talk, but I just want to say something that I had the opportunity in the last couple of weeks to go to Honolulu and New York City. And the homelessness issue there is, in Honolulu, is off the charts. And also New York City, it's getting really bad in places that you wouldn't think, like Midtown. And I mean, all over. And DC, you guys spend a lot of time there, it's getting really bad. And homelessness is all over the place. And all of the cities are making decisions to just push out the encampments. I guess we're doing this on college campuses now for other reasons, but like, we are doing this to our homeless population. We're just moving them out of sight, and they're scattering all over. And we do have a homelessness issue here. We've always had it. And I think it's getting worse. But it's out of sight, because you don't see it on Broad Street as much as you used to. But that doesn't mean they're not here. They are. So we are not immune to what's happening around the country coming out of the pandemic. And it's getting worse in many of our major cities. And it's getting worse here. So we do have to think about strategies for homelessness. And it's very difficult to do. But we should be thinking about that.
Agreed. Very
This
good.
was actually, sorry, can I just jump in? Because I was just checking my notes. This was discussed in the Affordable Living Policy Work Group. And there was a representative from the homeless shelter, and she shared that they've gone from maybe 20 to 40 people per season to 70 to 80 people per season. So they're objectively getting worse. And she said that the guests would like to have the shelter be open more than it is currently, and that a good portion of them are actually working. So just a little bit of context on that issue. I agree that's an important strategy that's missing. But I don't know if that's the level of feedback that council is looking for. Can you share with us whether that is, like, do you want additional strategies, or do you want specific projects within the strategies?
I think we are open to everything. So if there are even things that, that have been in the back of your mind that you would like to see included that don't fit into any of these categories, if there are categories that should be expanded, we're looking for feedback, all shapes and forms. What is helpful, though, because Derek mentioned that there's a million things that we could do. We could be here all night talking about how to get more affordable housing in Falls Church. What's helpful is to figure out how to prioritize, like, what would be in the next 2 years for staff time the most bang for our buck for what we're investing. So that I also leave to you all to say, hey, we care about these 10 things, but these 3 things or these 5 things or whatever else are the most important things to get done in the next 2 years.
I think, go ahead.
I just want to make one quick comment, and Justine, I'm not trying to make light of what you just said, but you said bang for the buck, and we just need more bucks, period. Like, if we could just accomplish that, get more money in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund that we have, that's a win, because we have very little money that we're spending, so let's just work on getting more bucks.
I agree. I mean, I think in terms of prioritization, you've heard loud and clear from this commission, just the housing strategy here is very important to folks up on the dais here. We do need a motion to extend the meeting. I know this is everybody's favorite topic, but
So
you want
moved.
to extend the meeting a little bit further? Mr. Duncan?
So moved.
How long? You would time?
You know me, if you've got me making a motion, there's no pull date. Mr. Krasner's job is to perfect the motion.
Up at 6 a.m. How about 20 minutes?
20 minutes. Any second?
Second.
All approved?
Aye.
Or we continue this. I don't want to like shortchange important topics, or we do this another meeting.
It's a bit of what I'm afraid of actually going through. I mean, just talking about this one housing topic, as Mr. Hira said, I don't want to shortchange, as you just said, in the spirit of just getting something here. So what is your timing? What are we looking at in terms of feedback from this commission?
The referral memo asked for feedback by the end of the month, and your next item does have 2 public hearing items and a joint work session. So it doesn't present a lot of opportunities for discussion. Although what might be helpful, I think, since what you might be able to do is if everyone sort of had some homework to come back with maybe 2 or 3 things that they wanted to suggest, is, across the entire document, if everyone came up with 2 or 3 projects, then you all could put them on the table and say, yeah, that looks good as sort of feedback from the commission. And then we could, if you all put that on a table, put that up for discussion at your next meeting, and then staff could write that up in a memo for you. You could confirm that it's correct, and under your signature, Mr. Chair, we could transmit that to council.
I think it sounds like a smart way to go forward, just in terms of, my own headspace and thinking through all these little items here tonight. I think we'd be better served to take more time later, but folks, anything else?
I think the risk, if I could, part of the risk here is that I think I've seen prior council work plans where, they had 70 items and staff got 30 done. They had 50 items and staff got 30 done. They had 35 items and staff got 30 done. So I think the real challenge, the thing I'm always worried about is that if the work plan has 100 items, that's not a stretch goal. You're just leaving it to staff to pick the 30 items that get done. So, and you hope they're thinking the same things you are. So I think the value of the work plan is really in communicating sort of a concise list of things to work on, because the bulk of what staff does is routine stuff, right? There's no work plan item for pick up the trash and the leaves, and yet that gets done. So I think, and all the boards and commissions are communicating their own ideas at the same time. So it has the risk of sort of ballooning into something unmanageable. So I think if the commission can come out of sort of maybe the next session with maybe 5 to 10 items that they really believe strongly in, then you can be sort of have confidence that those 5 to 10 items are going to sort of get on the list. Whereas if you give a list of 20 or 30, who knows?
Mr. Chair, I probably will not be here at the next meeting, so I wonder if I could just contribute one item for tonight. And has to do with under the environmental sustainability item. Strategy 1, there was discussion at council's meeting on Monday about whether there was sufficient resources available to implement all of the various action items in the 2 energy action plans. And it strikes me that the first thing that really has to be available to make that assessment properly is the status. And so I'd like to recommend under that strategy 1 that there be some type of a readout report, a status report relating to each of the individual action items in the 2 energy plans, much like what we do on the CIP, where there's a kind of a routine reporting out. It doesn't necessarily have to be quarterly. That could be very draining on staff time, but at least on a semi-annual basis, there should be a report to City Council on those action plans, what the status of it is, so that there's an opportunity for heads up if additional resources need to be found, that the council is aware of that, as well as relevant boards and commissions.
Ms. Freelander?
Thank you. I agree with you, but I just want to point out on page 18 of our Planning Commission 2023 annual report to City Council, question 3 actually asks this very question: what projects should be included in the next council work plan that aren't already listed? And so we have affordable housing and anti-displacement that we, as a commission, identified 4 items underneath that: affordable housing master plan, community land bank, Main Street program, anti-displacement toolkit. So I think we kind of have this started already. So it would be good to kind of take a look at what we've already identified that we were already thinking would be in a work program, and if there's more to add to that, and then we can kind of say, let's rank them, during our work session. Then at least we've got a structure to move forward with.
This is what I was thinking too, because I'll have the presentation to council on the 13th or something, so that's before then we would have another session too, so. And part of what it would present are these priorities, right, so.
So I guess maybe the question is we came up with this list, I believe, at our advance in January. So is there anything that we would, and I agree, I still think this is a great list, but based on council's current work plan, is there anything that we would prioritize differently or that we would add based on these sort of 5 areas? We didn't, I guess we have Main Streets and anti-displacement toolkit are kind of are sort of in that business category, which I think is their 5th priority, or the economic development priority. But are there other things based on the strategies that are listed here for each of these priorities that we feel like our original list is missing? I mean, I know Complete Streets and Vision Zero are on my list for transportation. That was on the original list. I think they're mentioned specifically here in Strategy 2 on the transportation slide. We had one environmental sustainability.
I think we could add monitoring of the CEAP to the environmental sustainability. And I know we mentioned project monitoring down below, but I think that's a different type of monitoring. I think what Mr. Stevens was referring to was kind of monitoring where are we at in terms of reaching those goals, and what do we need to react to and respond to rejigger so that we can meet those goals rather than not have any kind of survey or update and then it's too late to kind of catch up, right? So I think we have to be a little bit more responsive in, the initiatives that we set forward in that plan, to at least understand, are we even making a dent? Are people using the one-stop shop, right? If that's not the case and nobody's really using this, what do we need to do to kind of reposition that so that we can get more communication out to the town and really incentivize people to want to participate in that program?
The interjurisdictional power purchase that's referenced here is one action item in one of the plans. So trying to get a reporting status on all of the actions is really kind of a level up, but would provide a lot of information on trying to figure out what to do next.
Yeah. So I would add that to the sustainability, environmental sustainability strategies. I mean, I think for transportation and safety, I think we've discussed previously, removing utility poles in the sidewalks to promote pedestrian and bike safety. And I think we've been looking at the bike master plan, and that kind of falls nicely into that category as well. So.
We should have had a bike rack included into the site plan of Oak. We should have said, hey, we want people biking on Park. Could we have a bike rack?
I actually think that there was a question and somebody posed it and they said they store their bikes inside. I think I read that.
Those garages.
They said they made enough room in the garage to store bikes.
You hit it with your car door when you.
Any other thoughts on either strategy for us or some feedback for council here?
The feedback, what is the deliverable? Like, are we going to discuss this again at our next meeting?
Well, what I was hearing is that, right, a lot of sort of what you all had already identified in your annual report, I think is a lot of the same things that are still on people's mind, except for, I think, maybe the additions of the right, that were sort of identified, the GOEP and the CEEP reporting, funding for, right, we had a lot of sort of actions, you all had a lot of actions, but funding for affordable housing and making that a dedicated, more highly dedicated item, it may be satisfactory to the group just to let the chair report on those, right, on the report as prepared previously with those additions.
And that would constitute the feedback to council.
I think it's a less muddled message because we're already on to present next week, to
Yep.
send a conflicting memo 2 weeks later.
Yeah. That sounds good. I'm have every confidence in your.
Great. Okay.
And what would be helpful, I guess maybe during the report or when there's a Q&A, it looks like all of these items do fit within the council priorities. I guess I would like more detail on project monitoring, including TDM plan implementation and zoning ordinance review and cleanup. If it's possible to give more details on that, such that when we do go into actually selecting items to put on the work plan, so that we know exactly what goes into that.
Sure.
Or what you all were thinking for that.
Excellent. Can do.
And I guess, I mean, the clock is already ticking, right? So we already have a lot of, I think, really big, important projects that are underway, including the bike master plan, which I think should be maybe at the top of this list, and the accessory dwelling unit effort is kicking off, underway, commercial parking relief for businesses underway. So I don't want to lose sight too of those things that are they're already happening. I mean, I wouldn't want them to be stalled because we were sort of giving feedback about prioritizing something else. So
Yeah, some of the items that make their way onto the council work plan are sort of weighty items. Some, I think, especially if the council work plan items can be very clear that they're sort of projects versus programs. Like projects is something we can deliver and say, yes, we did it. Whereas programs is like, ooh, like, I guess we're running the program. But is that a success or not? What was the outcome of that? So I think to the extent things are defined as projects, that's helpful. It's, you want to have a big goal and then measurable steps to get there, right? So if there are multiple things in the same stream, that can be helpful, right? So that the community, council, staff can all feel a sense of accomplishment. Like every 3 months, we're checking something off. If we fill the work plan with things that all take 18 months, that's tough. Especially since you said, Commissioner, that by the time this gets adopted, we'll be 6 months into the 2-year term. It takes about 2 months to scope a project, and you also got to clear what's already on your plate. So I think really sort of thinking about sort of discrete steps and actionable items, completing the things that are already, sort of underway, but recognizing some of these things may be things that maybe get kicked. Any new items might, if they're not already in the works, they may get kicked off, in 6 months or 12 months' time.
Can I just make one suggestion related to Paul? What you just said is that if you look at our 2024 recommendations to council, we've got affordable housing and anti-displacement. We have community land bank. We are already doing that as a city. We are land banking at Virginia Village. So could it be like continue, expand to land bank there, right? I mean, it's $1 million to buy one of those quads. I think have 2 or 3, maybe we have more. Let's just keep that going. So like, here's a recommendation that we're giving. It's already underway. But it's like, let's keep doing it. So.
Well, and I think that it can be helpful, I'll say, sort of speaking from the staff perspective here, right? So putting on my sort of staff, well, I guess I'm always wearing my staff hat. Right, like Virginia Village, that's going to take years just to get the property. And so any year that's not included in the work plan, and whether it's, you know, the housing staff or the economic development staff or whoever is trying to buy those properties, any work plan that directs them to do something else is delaying Virginia Village. So I think one of the things that's tough is that some of these projects, especially if they take a sort of a sustained campaign to achieve, they need to stay on the work plan even if there's nothing particularly public or particularly exciting about it, right? That if the community is committed to the Virginia Village plan, then we just need to recognize that multiple staff members are dedicated to that for several years, if not longer. So I think that's something that might be a little difficult, is that the work plan might need to sort of start fewer initiatives and instead sort of sustain or complete the things that are already underway, right? Like the property yard, that's a big deal. You're going to have to, we're talking about a ULI TAP. That's going to take several members to prepare. It's going to take a lot of community time, a lot of council time. You got to plan it, you got to zone it, you got to do your utility planning for it, right? So that is several years of staff work, you know, absent the sort of funding and refining the architecture and finalizing use programming, things like that. So,
But unless there's something that we think that they should stop doing, there's not really a lot of value for us to tell them to continue to do what they're doing, right?
it's helpful, I guess it's helpful to remind them that like the bike master plan, I think in May and June, fingers crossed, May and June, we're going to hold 6 meetings, one for each of the priority routes. And so if we want to stay on the bike master plan, then we got to stay on the bike master plan, right? Because we're going to invest, 3 staff members over the next 2 months doing nothing but that. And so that's going to sidetrack the missing links program, or it's going to sidetrack TDM monitoring or some other project. So I think that's, I guess, the message I'm trying to convey, is that all these things sort of take staff hours, and it's usually the same staff, right? The other thing that I think is a little tough, and I'm very sensitive to this, right? That the council work plan, right? I get excited about it, right? In the sense that like a lot of it is stuff that's going through planning or through economic development or through public works. But like I said, like 80-90% of the work that the city does doesn't actually show up, right? So it's not 200 people trying to deliver these items, because 180 people are already delivering most of the city services that sort of go unsung.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I mean. I don't think any of us know how the city itself functions, and that maybe other than Mr. Duncan, but it would be hard to know for us, I think, to say, well, here's how to deploy resources better,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I think us focusing on some of the bigger the major thrusts,
Yes.
right, I think make more sense.
Well, no, I guess what I'm not trying, I realize I'm not using the most positive words here, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that the things that are important, keep talking about those things. So if we think Virginia Village is important, let's keep talking about
Yeah,
Virginia
right,
Village. If we
exactly,
think Fields is
yeah.
important, let's keep talking about Fields.
Yeah, I mean, just because we're doing something doesn't mean that we should keep doing it if something more important emerges that we feel more strongly that we should do. I would say affordable housing falls into that category compared to, oh, I don't know, well, let me figure out who to insult here. Displacement of businesses. There's an example. I mean, it's a serious issue, but it's not, to me at least, as pressing and urgent and critical and requiring as much attention as the housing situation, particularly Virginia Village. I mean, if we allocated resources to staff whose job it was to come up with a schematic of, the new Virginia Village community, the way it looks, 20 years from now when we get it all finished, that would, to me, be a worthy thing to help people visualize it in the same way that the Public Works is doing a good job of helping us visualize the new property yard. Their presentation the other night, I don't imagine many people saw it because it was late in their meeting, but it was good, substantive, answered a lot of council questions, and helped you sort of see, we're not going to be able to kick this down the road. We got to deal with it, and we got to deal with it within a couple of years, probably, not 10 years. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not contradicting anybody here, but some tough choices do have to be made. And it's up to Justine to solve all these problems now, so.
She wants to get to bed. Running out of time.
We actually are too, so, I mean, I think we have marching orders here. I think we have a good sense of, we'll use the presentation to council as the opportunity to provide unified feedback based on the work we did at the retreat, at the advance, based on a little bit of the comments here today. And if there's other things in the meantime, folks can just certainly let me know as I pull together the presentation, but I don't know how else to proceed. I think that's probably the best way.
Sounds good.
Make sense, Mr. Stoddard? All right. Does it make sense, council member? Okay.
Sounds great.
Before you let Justine go, Mr. Chair, she asked that I put a plug in for the documentary that's being shown this coming Sunday, but she would do a much better job of plugging for that than me, so I would invite her to make a pitch for Join or Die.
Join or Die is created by Pete Davis, he grew up here. He's a Falls Church native, and he created an amazing film that was premiered at South by Southwest last year. It's won numerous awards. It features the likes of Hillary Clinton and many other, Pete Buttigieg, who's the head of transportation. It is a phenomenal film. It changed the way I actually structure my life. It makes me think about democracy and society in completely different ways. So if that is not a strong enough endorsement, I highly recommend you all see the film. It is this Sunday at 2 p.m. There will be a talk back afterwards. And because the film is based on Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone research, there will be bowling afterwards at the bowling alley. So you all are invited to join, and I would look forward to seeing you all there.
Where is the screening?
High school.
It is at Meridian High School.
And there's no charge, is that true? I've seen pitches for free tickets.
Completely free.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember, very much. Anything else on this item before we close for the night? All right. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Justine.
This is my club. I don't think I've tried to join any more clubs.
What's that?
This is my club.
This is your.